sites that combine Tomahawk missiles, decoys, and for the first time in combat, bunker buster bombs. Here is what Secretary Hegseth had to say.
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are doing a recording on June 22nd. I did a live show last night. We're doing a simulcast on X Spaces. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please help support the work that I do by making sure that you subscribe to all the channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rubble. Make sure you subscribe to all of them. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. If you'd like to support my work, either if you're a domestic audience or a international viewer, please help by sharing the links. You can also donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee, or be a paid member to my Patreon channel. All these videos I do are for free. I don't put stuff behind a paywall. Stop supporting people that have Substack and putting crap behind a paywall. I believe that news that you need to know should be for free. So please help support the work that I do. Also, pay attention. I'm going to tell you how to improve your health by stacking the supplements that I have on my store. These are things that I do every day to slow down the aging process and to boost up my immune system. In addition, if you listen to my live shows during the weekday, I actually tell you how to make money in the market in real time. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do, because I'm telling you how to get rich, and I'm also telling you how to slow down the aging process, while all these other fucking clowns are a bunch of pacifists. So let's go to what's going on live here. A lot has happened last night, and the big question is, how is it going to affect the markets when the agent session opens up? So let's listen into Bloomberg right now, which is, they have a special live Bloomberg. Right now I'm recording this at 10 a.m. New York time.
Legal as well. Joining us now within his political controversy is John Bolton. His public service to the nation for decades is noted. He is someone who elicits conversation among Republicans and Democrats. John Bolton, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg this morning. Ambassador, I see your Der Spiegel interview, Der Spiegel International. You say this is a president in need of face saving. And John, I need to quote in entirety this blistering comment by you on the president. He has no political philosophy. He confuses foreign policy with the personal relationships he has with other heads of state. He thinks Putin is his friend. During his first term in office in 2018 in Singapore, Trump came out of the meeting with Kim Jong-un and said, quote, "We fell in love with each other." Where does that stand now after these historic events, John Bolton, of the last 18 hours?
Well, I can say unequivocally, I think President Trump made the right decision for America in attacking the Iranian nuclear program. We could have done it first term too. I think the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, which is part of the Iranian Ring of Fire strategy around Israel, obviously led us to this point, probably the worst mistake Iran has ever made. And I think Israel's decision to begin attacking the nuclear program itself last week is a significant reason why we're here now. But whatever the reason, it was the right thing to do. Let's remember this is day one. We now have to await the Iranian decision on how to retaliate. I think they'd make a big mistake if they did, because I think whether it's Donald Trump or any other president, they would have to respond forcefully.
An emotional and delicate question. Can we succeed, Republicans, Democrats, Americans, can we succeed, John Bolton, in this process without taking out the theocracy of Iran?
No.
I don't believe so, and I've thought that for many years. I think the only way to lasting peace and security in the Middle East is the overthrow of the Ayatollahs. I think the sanctions that were put in place when we withdrew from the badly flawed 2015 nuclear deal, when Trump withdrew in 2018 with the first step, they call it the maximum pressure campaign, but maximum pressure is what Israel started last Thursday to take out the nuclear and ballistic missile programs. But the next step has to be regime change, because this regime is committed to technological dominance within the Islamic world and hegemony in the Middle East. It poses a clear threat directly to the United States and many of our friends and allies.
Within your study, either Bolton Hawk or a Dove or whatever, do you see any template of success of regime change in the Levant, in the Middle East, in Libya for that matter?
Sure, I think there have been a number of successful efforts, and I think here the regime in Tehran is at its weakest point since 1979, since it came to power, for all kinds of reasons, as I indicated in the Wall Street Journal op-ed earlier this week. The people are very dissatisfied economically. The young people are dissatisfied. The ethnic groups are dissatisfied. The women are dissatisfied after the Mahsa Amini murder 2 years ago. And I think they're looking, the people of Iran are looking at the devastation of Iran's terrorist proxies, the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, and now turning their nuclear and ballistic missile programs into ashes and saying, what did all that do for the Iranian people? We spent untold billions of dollars over decades. We've got nothing from it. The regime is totally responsible for it. The people see the self-dealing and the corruption by the Ayatollahs and the top Revolutionary Guard officers. I think the sentiment is very negative on the regime. There's been no outpouring of pro-regime sentiment since Israel's attacks began. I'm not saying this is over with or going to be easy, but you've got a regime with an 85-year-old supreme leader who's ruled for 36 years with only one other supreme leader before him. It is in a very dangerous, delicate position.
Is it dangerous enough, John, that it can happen within organically, or do you think outside agents are needed, either Israeli or American or even others?
Well, I don't think there's any need for boots on the ground, but I think it's been a mistake for over 20 years not to aid the Iranian opposition inside Iran. It's very widespread, but it doesn't have centralized leadership, which is in a sense a good thing as well as a bad thing because the regime can't take it down. But helping coordination through communications or other resource assistance across Iran, I think would be an entirely proper thing to do.
John, how do you think President Trump came to that decision last evening? What changed? Because there certainly is a part of his base that really adheres to the America First doctrine, and this is anything but, arguably.
Well, but I remember what Trump said last week. He made it up, and he decides what it is. And it just shows why it's not a philosophy in any convenient sense of that word. It's just what Trump wants to do. And I think Trump remembered very well in the 2016 presidential campaign, he made stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons a central part of that campaign. And if he had not followed through on it, I think he would have had real political consequences to follow. So I think that's the biggest explanation.
John Bolton, I believe Secretary Rubio is holding more than a few jobs. It's sort of like Paul Sweeney here at Bloomberg Radio. John Bolton, with these events, with the Secretary standing behind the President last evening, do we have a State Department policy and diplomacy right now? Or is it essentially off one desk at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
Well, I think it really is off that one desk. I think it's a mistake to combine the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State roles. No offense to Marco, for whom I have a lot of respect, but he's not Henry Kissinger. And I think that the coordination of policy in a complex, fast-moving region like the Middle East really needs two people to do what are more than full-time jobs as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. One person could just be overwhelmed by it.
The men and women at risk, John Bolton, you're perceived by your harsh critics as a hawk. I think that your visibility here, your setting a conversational tone of debate has been really laudatory as well. But just the simple, after these events, as Paul's mentioned throughout this show this morning, the at risk of our men and women in the Middle East, how do you perceive that?
I think it's you have to take it as very high. We know the Iranians have used Shia militia in Iraq before. They fired missiles themselves from Iran. But Iran has been harming Americans since the revolution in 1979 itself, when they took our embassy personnel hostage, when they set up terrorist groups in Lebanon that attacked our embassy in 1983 and the Marine barracks in Lebanon and later that year. A whole series of events since then. This regime is an adversary of the United States. I hope that the delay that President Trump took was to help shore up the defenses for the deployed military forces for our civilian personnel at embassies and consulates, and really for private American citizens all over the region and in the United States where Iran carries out terrorist attacks.
John, how do you think President Putin is viewing the news in the last 18 hours? Does this change the calculus potentially in Ukraine?
Well, I'll tell you, three capitals in the world where they're not very happy today. One of them is Moscow, one of them is Beijing, and the other is Pyongyang. This shows that America is not an isolationist country, that even Donald Trump is prepared to do this. And again, I want to say clearly, without any qualification, the Trump decision to strike was the right decision. And now Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un all have to worry, among others, about thinking they could put one over on the United States.
Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg this morning. We welcome all of you to a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance. We don't have anything tradable, as Paul gave a nice summary earlier. You said we begin to see tradable data, oil and such, 5 p.m. this Sunday.
Yeah, beginning around 5 and 6 p.m., some of these markets and the futures will start opening up, as well as some of the Asian markets.
Bitcoin has deteriorated as a 24/7 trading. Bitcoin has deteriorated through the morning from a negative 300 now, negative 1900. Bitcoin setting at 100,000 there. My eyes are failing me right now. This is an honor because it expands.
It's very important to pay attention to what is going to happen in the Asian session in terms of equities, the futures for the S&P 500, oil, Bitcoin, if that's going to be the proxy. That means risk is going to be off. VIX is going to spike, probably going to have sell-off in the equity market. And I wouldn't be surprised that we probably might see some prices going up for the treasuries for a safe haven. But please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Stay with my broadcast throughout today and into the Asian session. I'm going to walk you through it where everything's going to be fine. And not just that, tonight at 10 p.m., I'm going to also have a show with John Hogue. We have it scheduled live. We'll take questions. It's going to be a good show because of everything that's going on with Iran. So, please join us at live at 10 o'clock. 10 p.m. We'll be broadcasting on YouTube and on X Spaces. Please go to my store, support the work that I do by getting the structural nano silver soaps. You can get it in lavender and in peppermint. You can also get it in lemongrass and charcoal tea tree. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great soaps that I have and help with your health and wellness. Super important. In addition, if you're 40 years of age or older, get the vitamin B complex. The first 4 B vitamins will help with the electron transport chain of your mitochondria. That's going to help you build ATP, so you're going to have more energy. Vitamin B complex helps with cellular metabolism, and vitamin B12 helps with neural health. It's very important to protect your neurons. Take it. Take my advice. It's super important. You need to protect your neurons. In 5 years, within 5 years, you're going to see a lot of people having problems neurologically. You need to start protecting it. And there's a holistic way to do it. If you pay attention and you take the proper supplementation, you're going to be able to improve your brain function. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the B complex vitamins and get the structural nano silver soaps. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And use discount 5 and you get $5 off. All right, let's continue with Bloomberg.
The war against Britain, then he was overthrown and democracy was introduced. During wars, people are genuinely, and I can say this almost firsthand, talking to Iranians who are in Europe, who have relatives in Iran, people in Iran are right now just too busy trying to survive this war. Prior to this war, inflation, food inflation was between 40 to 50%. Housing inflation was 84%. Just imagine what would happen in New York if yearly rents were bumped up every year by 84%. This is what's happening in Tehran. Now the situation is even worse. So Iranians are just trying to survive the current conditions until this war ends. And only after that, I think, if there is going to be an uprising, they will have a space. They'll have the space to consider it.
One final question, if I could, Dr. Javandofor, and it's just simple. We just heard from Ambassador Bolton that he pretty much predicts a regime change, a need for regime change. I don't see any optimism that we've executed regime change in Iran. Am I right on that? Could it be doable?
Well, on the one hand, Israel has been attacking symbols of the regime, not only the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting, but other units and organizations in Iran's judiciary that put down protests. But, so it is up to the people of Iran to do regime change. Regime change will only happen when you have millions of Iranians on the streets of Iran protesting and overthrowing this regime. Iran has a history of revolutions. There was a constitutional revolution in 1905, 1906. We had the 79 revolution in Iran. People are active. There could be a better future for Iran. But we can also not rule out that this regime has something like 20% support of the 20% of the population. And, even if 10% of those go out afterwards and create a guerrilla warfare or create instability, we're talking about 2 million people, 1.5 million people. They could cause serious damage. So as much as we all desire a better future for Iran, the road from here to a successful democracy to Iran is paved with many dangers, including also, let's not forget, the experience of overthrowing regimes in Syria, Libya, and in Syria, which took 10 years and 500,000 dead people.
Doctor, thank you so much. Dr. Meir Javandofor from Reichman University. Thank you to Harris Brown, who's coordinated all of our Israeli coverage today. Ethan Bronner, Dan Williams is scheduled to be with us one more time. And from Dr. Javandofor there as well. We turn from the debate of Israel, of the Eastern Mediterranean, back to the debate of Capitol Hill. This will be engaged tonight at 6 p.m., Balance of Power with a special edition, really focused, I'm sure, on how America will awake tomorrow. Joe Matthew, one final moment with us here this morning. I look, Joe Matthew, at the complexities that I have learned in our special broadcast versus what I thought I knew 4 or 5 hours ago. Will there be an education for the members of our politics? Will people become more informed after this attack to make new decisions Monday morning?
It's a great question, because we're already hearing a lot from lawmakers who don't love this, Tom, and that goes for Democrats and Republicans. We knew that there was a split within MAGA. Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeting this morning, "Let us pray that we are not attacked by terrorists on our homeland." Tom Massey, Republican, Kentucky. "I'm amazed at the mental gymnastics being undertaken by neocons." Tim Kaine, of course, he's a Democrat from Virginia, big military state and a big supporter of the military, is calling this unconstitutional, an offensive war of choice. He suggests that he moved without congressional authorization. Ro Khanna is up with legislation here that would slow the president's march on all of this, because we don't know exactly what is going to happen next. And there's going to be a more difficult conversation, I think, when everybody comes back from the weekend, we get through the Sunday shows. And instead of focusing on reconciliation this coming week, we thought we might have a vote on Wednesday, and we still could. This is going to suck up a lot of oxygen out of the room.
That's kind of where I want to go, Joe. I mean, the Congress has a big to-do list ahead of it, and it requires some level of bipartisanship, but you see a big piece of news. Now, this was, by all accounts, a huge military success, but as you mentioned, there's some political fallout here. How pronounced do you expect it will be? Again, with the backdrop that it looks pretty darn successful from a military perspective.
Yeah, it's hard to answer, and beyond bluster, beyond a loud conversation, and maybe a lot of protesting. Both leaders, Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader Thune, have expressed great support for these strikes and have been in touch with the White House on this. So it's hard to tell what form it's going to take. There is going to be a lot of business at hand. There's a $150 billion increase in defense spending, by the way, that's part of this bill. that maybe this headline hastens its passage. We're at an interesting inflection point here with everybody watching from their home districts, and it's going to take them getting back to town to sort it out.
Here's the best live chat this morning, folks. Thank you so much for this out on YouTube. I am worried about the inside of the US. What happens next there? Joe Matthew, that's every single politician's question right now, isn't it?
That's right. We've been careful this morning to talk about military assets and our military footprint in the Middle East, what could happen regionally. But yes, what happens if terror cells are activated here at home? What happens if in any capital?
But the thing is, leaders lead and they take risks. And not just that. Is it possible that some sort of cell gets activated in the United States? Very possible. Very possible. Don't be fearful. We're doing the right thing, and there's a blessing with the United States on this. The reason why we had a quagmire in the Middle East for the last 20 years with Iraq and Afghanistan was because we went in through false pretenses. But this issue with Iran is not false pretenses. This is an existential threat to the United States, to Israel, and the world at large. Not only that, we're going to be going to war with China. You better start controlling the oil from the Middle East so you can chokehold the energy flow from Iran to China. Now, Alex Jones and Bannon wanted to tell you this is going to lead to Armageddon and blah, 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 blah. We're America first. We need to be a pacifist. Wrong, 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 wrong. Because they keep on thinking that the blessing is only going to be for the pacifist MAGA group. But they don't realize that the blessing in the United States is happening because we're willing to take risks and neutralize a major threat that is affecting the world, not just the Middle East. Reason why we were successful was because we were blessed. That was the reason. The reason why we failed in Afghanistan was because we were cursed. So Stephen Bannon, Alex Jones, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you think that Alex Jones is right, then there's going to be Armageddon, and you're going to be sweating a lot because it's going to be a ball of fire. So you should be going to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and getting the deodorants that I have. I have peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and also citrus. It's for males and females. It's dual purpose. It'll help to detoxify your body, and you use it as a deodorant. Perfect for Armageddon. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get these dual purpose deodorant bars. They're made from essential oils from the Himalayas. Very high quality, no aluminum, no baking soda, very high quality deodorants. And be prepared for Armageddon. Another thing that you'll need for Armageddon, according to Alex Jones, is you're going to need to detoxify your body because there's going to be a ball of fire in the air and there's going to be chemical warfare and nuclear warfare and blah, blah, blah. Well, you're going to have to detoxify your body. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. This binds to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and gets rid of them in about 6 to 8 hours through urination. Take zeolite every day. Take 2 or 3 drops underneath your tongue. Drink it with filtered water. And guess what? You're detoxifying your body. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Detoxify your body every day. Super important. And not only that, you better stock up with toothpaste because you never know when you're going to run out, especially when there's Armageddon from Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon, because they think that Trump did the wrong thing by knocking out the nuclear facilities. They think that this is just going to be another neocon play. Wrong. Totally different. Totally different. It's a comparison fallacy to think that what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan is going to happen in Iran. Totally different. Absolutely different. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver toothpaste. Whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, helps with the health of your gum line, reduces inflammation at the gum line. Super important for your oral health. Stock it up, because according to Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon, there's going to be Armageddon.
doing it on behalf of leadership because they know that that's what it's gonna take to get it done.
Joe, this is what Terry Haynes alluded to. Paul was rude enough to bring it up here to get off script from these military events. But do you agree with Terry Haynes? It's just business as usual on domestic policy? Or do these events affect that debate this week?
No, I don't think this will likely affect the momentum that we have here. Remember, this is an entirely Republican project. As long as they get the family on the same page, they get it done. And they, going up against Donald Trump right now is going to be really difficult for even the SALT Republicans in New York, because if you don't vote yes on this bill, it's a massive tax hike with a Republican brand on it. And I just don't see that happening. I think they get this done.
Paul, one final question to Joe.
Joe, do you think there will be any pushback, material pushback on President Trump from the faction of his supporters, his base, that really put America first or take that really seriously?
Let's see what happens from here. If this is in fact an isolated event, the way that Pete Hegseth described, the way the president described, then he may be lauded for this, eliminating Iran's nuclear capacity without us actually getting into a full-fledged war. If things start to go south with retaliation against our military assets, or God forbid civilians in cities in America or around the world, it's going to change real quickly. You're going to hear a lot of "I told you so." Keep your eyes on Steve Bannon.
Joe Matthew, thank you so much. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. And just tonight at 6 p.m., Balance of Power, a special.
Bring it on, because what it's going to do is it's going to strengthen the United States, and it's going to usher in a world of freedom and prosperity. Iran's capability is majorly degraded in conventional means. Now the question is, are there cells in the United States? Now, how did those cells get here with the porous border? Oh, Biden. Now, like I said, once Trump was elected, that we need to worry about a 9/11-like event. Very possible that it happens. But guess what? Leaders lead, and leaders take risks. Don't be fearful. Move forward. America, we need to stop having this fear game where it's like, oh, I can't do anything because I'm fearful. Well, maybe Iran is going to do some sort of terrorist cell, in Europe or in Israel or in the United States. We can't do anything. No, don't be fearful. If it happens, respond. And this is the reason why it's so important to decapitate the Ayatollah. Because you think that those cells are going to be activated if the Ayatollah is decapitated? I don't think so. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the foundational supplements such as the multivitamins and the probiotics. Now let's talk about the probiotics. I have two types of probiotics, a powdered version and also a VeggieCap version. This is the VeggieCap version. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. Drink it with filtered water. What probiotics do is it creates a good gut biome that allows you to digest your foods properly, you absorb your nutrients better. It helps with your metabolism. It brings down inflammation at the gut level. It improves your immune system in the GI tract. It helps with the communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. You'll sleep better. You'll have more mental acuity. That brain fog will go away. In addition, you're gonna be more well rested. You're gonna be consolidating memory. And when you have a good gut biome, your skin is going to improve. Your nails and your hair will improve. You can see physical manifestations of a poor gut biome. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. I have it in the VeggieCap form and in the powdered form. So please go to my store, use discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. Now, since we're talking about a foundational part of the protocol, also get the multivitamins. Multivitamins are super important as cofactors for enzymatic activity. This multivitamin is easy to digest. It's a foundational piece of your health protocol. And this has vitamin A and D3 and the B vitamins and folate and manganese and zinc. And it has lots of multivitamins that you need and you can read the label on my website, to be a good foundational piece and you build off of it. So get the multivitamin and get the probiotics. It's a great stack to start your health protocol. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Make sure you use discount 5 to get $5 off.
But there's no question that Iran wants to lash out. The Houthis are still there. And so the carriers and the strike group that goes with them, their destroyers, et cetera, have to really be vigilant for drone strikes. But what the Navy's been doing is a lot of defense, watching Iran's missiles. We've had a couple Navy destroyers actually intercept Iranian missiles that were going to Israel. This morning, force protection for our U.S. forces is top priority. And some of those carrier planes have actually flown missions, kind of a combat air patrol over the assets to make sure that drone attacks aren't getting through.
Where is the naivete right now? We've had this, all can agree, historic event. Paul, I think we can say that it's an absolutely historic event. But with your years of experience of this, Dr. Grant, where are we naive right now in our assessment of the path forward?
In our understanding of how much we rely on this air power. 7 B-2 bombers just brought us back from the brink of nuclear catastrophe. But as you probably know, we only have 19 of those aircraft. Some are always committed to the nuclear triad. Usually a couple are out for repairs and modifications. We have let our stock of air power go down so far. The Navy is trying to build a new 6th generation stealth plane for their aircraft carriers, and the decision is all hung up in some Pentagon food fight. So while we had what we needed to take on this target set in Iran, we don't have what we need for China, for example.
So, Rebecca, from your perspective, how are you thinking about, how are you gaming out potential Iranian responses here?
Right, that is just such a huge priority. Well, you start off with our U.S. Space Force is watching their every move. They pick up every missile flare that's come out of Iran going against Israel, and of course, making sure it's not heading towards U.S. bases. I think the force protection, it's missile attacks on U.S. bases in the Middle East is what Iran would most like to do. Drones are a possibility too. Here in the U.S., the two things that pop up, of course, are sleeper cells. An Iranian was indicted for planning an attack on Ambassador Bolton. We know what's happened with their threats towards the president. But the other aspect is cyberspace. A few years ago, there was a thwarted Iranian attack on a dam in upstate New York, the Rybrook Dam, where they wanted to get into the control system and overflood the dam. So I think the FBI and Homeland Security are really on top of this, but there certainly is a threat, and it's very diverse. It's kind of a multi-domain threat here, even in the U.S.
What's the expectation here, Rebecca, about the extent of the damage to these Iranian facilities? President Trump last night, and Secretary Hegseth today said obliterated. Do we need independent verification of that? Is it, again, these were buried underneath a mountain?
They basically been, if you will, sort of collapsed and almost entombed. So the verification will be two things they're looking for. One is any nuclear radiation sniffing. The Air Force has a special plane that does that with other ways to assess that. And then the satellite imagery is going to see what are the Iranians doing at that site. Is there anybody moving around? Is anybody trying to shovel that out? Or has the whole thing basically just collapsed in on itself? And if that is the case, then they have sort of sealed that off and achieved the destruction that they want. And then there'll be some, they'll never tell us, but they'll do some secret assessment as to one of those massive ordnance penetrators. The special thing about them actually is they're fusing. Did they really go in and wait for the final detonation down in the underground chamber?
Rebecca Grant with us. We continue with Dr. Grant with the Lexington Institute. We welcome all of you to a good 30 minutes of conversation here to get to 11 a.m. This morning. Ali Shabi will join us here on the Saudis, the Arabs and Persians, and the tensions across from Morocco to Iran. We'll also revisit with Dan Williams into a very difficult.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the first part of the protocol, the first part of the the core, what I call the core, is getting the max 14, max 35 or cleanse. Take a teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle 20, 30 seconds, and then swallow. That's going to boost up your immune system, help with the epithelial lining in your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, help with the mucosal barrier, super important. Cleanse is 30 parts per million, max 14 is 14 parts per million, and max 35 is 35 parts per million. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Up the international world order, can't we all have world peace? Whereas in reality, Iran is all but China's client. China buys 90% of their oil. That's about 25% of Iran's paltry gross domestic product. You know, China just shipped Iran a couple shipfuls of ammonium perchlorate, which is the precursor chemical to make fuel for the solid fuel for the rocket motors that they're using to attack. And you know, China is the one who has kept Iran sort of in the game financially, even with the Western sanctions. And you know, they don't do a lot of investment in Iran, but China's really happy to have Iran bedeviling the U.S. and tying down U.S. forces in the region. It's terrible. They're really complicit and guilty in this.
Rebecca, to follow up on Tom's question, how do you think President Putin is digesting the news from the last 18 hours and how it may impact events in Ukraine?
Well, there again, the Russians buy drones from Iran. You know, Russia and Iran have a pretty long, complex relationship, but Russia actually built their civilian nuclear power plant. Russia's been trying to get their ore in to take away the uranium or whatever. I think on the one hand, it's a really good reminder to Putin of what U.S. air power, which we never unleashed in Ukraine, you know, what it can do. So watch out. But on the other hand, Putin has also, in this sort of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea axis, has been in there. They've really increased their drone production, and these are the same drones that they use against Israel. They would want to use against U.S. forces, and they sell them to Russia to use in Ukraine.
Rebecca, and folks, this goes back to the acclaimed LSE program. I took some courses there and I'm familiar with it. Not like Dr. Grant, but I'll claim some affiliation. The acclaimed international relations, Rebecca, of the London School of Economics, their iconic course, Russia in World Politics. I guess going back to Catherine the Great, they looked south. When they look south now, they've got a conflicted Turkey. They've got a small war in Ukraine going on. They've lost Syria, exaggeration, but go with it. And now we have these issues in Iran. How does Russia respond to this, or can they not respond?
Well, the new addition to the Russia in the World course is Russia vassal state of China and Xi Jinping. I mean, there again, just like with Iran's selling the energy, then it is China that has kept a lot of cash flowing into Russia by increasing their buys of oil. And we've seen some flow of microelectronics in pieces, to help with Russia's incredible rearmament. They're producing 1,500 tanks a year. In the Syria, Iran, all this, luckily U.S. military power and the work that Israel's done has really closed off a lot of options and amputated Putin's imperialism down in that region.
Right.
They also use the Syrian bases to reach into Africa. But still, it kind of all comes back to Beijing, and that's, to me, the real new layer.
I mean, Paul, can I ask the first dumb question in the morning?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to do this with Dr. Grant. Folks, you mentioned earlier China's support of Iran. In your head, Rebecca Grant, do you have Israel with a tactical ability to surgically take out those Chinese assistances, whether it's boats, chemicals, whatever? Can they take out on a micro basis the China effect on Tehran?
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? We certainly track the global shipping that brought in the chemical precursors, for instance. But the rest of it, we've seen a real reluctance by anybody to really stomp on oil flows, even the ones from Iran to China. A lot of reluctance around that.
Rebecca, a lot of folks will look at the American foreign policy under President Trump and say, America first. No more getting into these skirmishes outside of the U.S. Can we still say that this morning?
Well, America is the top priority, and that is why Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Let me just put it to you this way. We have now probably 50,000 US service members, from the garrison in Syria to the 5,000 sailors on the 2 aircraft carriers, 5,000 each. We have like 50,000 forces, all our best air power, 7 out of 19 B-2s to contain Iran. We cannot continue that for years and years and still contain Russia and China. And containment is back. We're stuck with it, even with America first. So we have, if you had to try to contain a nuclear Iran, we do not have the forces to do that. So that's why this strike was really, in fact, important and a top priority for the US as well as for the world going forward. They pulled us back from the brink.
Dr. Grant, thank you for joining us this morning. Rebecca Grant, the Lexington Institute this morning. We'll have her on again soon. As we move to the end of the hour, we have 2 important conversations here. Right now, Dan Williams revisits from Jerusalem. Dan, the sun, the arc, will set in Tel Aviv here in 2-3 hours. It is 5:40 p.m. in Tel Aviv. State for Israel, for Haifa, for Tel Aviv, for Jerusalem, the tension into this evening.
Well, good evening. As you can see from my background, it's a balmy evening, a ostensibly calm summer evening, the close of another summer day. But yes, there were significant missile salvos this morning that woke up the entire country. And to judge from the pattern of the last 9 days, this can be expected to recur overnight. However, I think there is hope that there might be a change in that pattern. This attack by the United States, its involvement, as your previous guest made very, very clear, is a game changer. It's a game changer for the United States. It's a game changer for the region. It may actually be a game changer for the Iranian regime in terms of their calculations. They may decide to draw a line underneath this entire conflict, review their position. They're now face to face with the world's great power, the great firepower of that great power, and may realize that it's game over in terms of a continued military contest, and it's time perhaps to capitulate diplomatically on nuclear talks, thereby bringing the conflict to a close and preserving themselves as a regime in Iran at the cost of a nuclear program that's already vastly degraded.
Dan, what do you think the next steps are here for Israel from both a military or a diplomatic position? Are they going to try diplomatically to start pushing their hand and saying, hey, Iran, your world really has changed in the last 18 hours. Let's get something on the table?
I think certainly yes on both, but remember that Israel and Iran are not negotiating directly. They never have. Iran does not acknowledge Israel's existence. Memorably, a few years ago, there was a very devastating earthquake in Iran, actually around the city of Qom, which is making headlines. And I remember the president at the time said Iran would welcome assistance from all countries except for Israel. This is a time when Israel was right in the region and had proven itself very, very capable of the first aid, first assistance, extrication teams to other disaster zones. This is a hardcore part of Iranian policy. So when it comes to diplomacy, Israel would be advising the Americans. That's a fair guess, given that the allies have been openly discussing how closely they've functioned in terms of this military confrontation with Iran. And I think actually it'd be very simple to know what the Israelis want, which is effectively what the US wants, which is an end to uranium enrichment in Iran, a dismantling of nuclear capacity, any capacity that could produce potentially a bomb now or in the future. So this requires a physical dismantling. Much of that has been achieved by bombs. Some of it would have to be achieved consensually on the ground by inspectors, bulldozers, and the like. That's what they would go for then. As for what the Israelis are doing now, to hear them telling it, they're pursuing their daily airstrikes to diminish the missile production capacity of Iran, what remains of their nuclear capacity, and also striking at Iranian proxies in Lebanon, potentially, should there be an attack from Lebanon. That seems very unlikely, given how Hezbollah has been cowed by Israeli actions in recent months, and in the Gaza Strip, where it's worth noting, and this was rather lost in the headlines, a sad development in that today the Israelis announced that they've recovered the bodies of 3 more hostages from Gaza, bringing the number of remaining hostages down to 50. So behind the headlines of Iran, the Israeli offensive in Gaza continues with results, not the best results in terms of what Israelis would want. So, I mean, the families
I think we've got some audio challenges there. He has been phenomenal, and thank you to all of our technical people on many different wirings up for radio and for television this morning. Dan Williams, our journalist in Tel Aviv with Ethan.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the gel. You can get it in the quick dispenser form or in the tube form. This is a dual purpose. You can use it as an aftershave. You can use it as a daily skincare. You can put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. Stays active for 5.5 hours. Great if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well. Have some at work, have some at home. You never know when you need it. Also, if you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, put it on there and it'll help to heal it. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the gel. Make sure you're prepared. You never know. Also, if you're 40 years of age or older, it's really important to take digestive enzyme complex. You know why? Because digestive enzyme complex is going to help to break down those proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, reduce the load on that pancreas, allow you to absorb your nutrients in your food, reduce the stress on the GI tract. It also has bromelain, which is fibrinolytic, and these proteolytic enzymes in here help to break up glycoproteins. Super important, especially during the crisis of 2020. And that's why I said, take the digestive enzyme complex during the crisis. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the digestive enzyme complex, help your pancreas health. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll benefit from the digestive enzyme complex because it's going to help break up that pre or post fueling source. So please go to my store, get the digestive enzyme complex, get the gel, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. And if you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Says the strikes obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions. He says now messages are being relayed publicly and privately to urge Iran back to the negotiating table. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi says the door to diplomacy is closed while attacks continue.
I want to play a little bit. I want to play a little bit of GB News.
Else, you hear that people saying, "Oh, well, they hate their leadership," and so on and so forth. But you often hear that comment about people within certain dictatorships, and then they end up rallying behind the flag. How do we know that that's not where we'll be, and we've actually made things a lot worse?
Because the Iranian people have tried several times to rise up boldly against the Iranian regime, and each time they failed because the world didn't come to their defense and basically threw them under a bus. And I really hope that the Iranian people take this opportunity to rise up, build a free and democratic Iran, and put this behind us. Let's remember, Israel and Iran used to have peace. There used to be flights between Israel and Tehran. They played football together until the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The regime is despised by the people. So many people have already fled abroad, and the Iranian diaspora in the UK are out there every Saturday or Sunday protesting against the pro-terrorist marches in central London because they despise the regime as well. But it's up for them to decide now whether to take advantage of this moment of opportunity and cast off the regime that has impoverished their country in a futile attempt to build the nuclear weapons to destroy Israel. I hope they succeed.
All right. Well, listen, Elon Levy, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your insights into the situation. That is Elon Levy. He is a former Israeli government spokesperson. Thank you. Well, it's 46 minutes after 3 o'clock. So to come, we'll cross live to America and hear more reaction to the US strikes on Iran. We'll speak to the host of the Politics People podcast. I'm Nana Akwe. This is GB News.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, so that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Is these separations between religion in the Middle East and Arab and Persian culture in the Middle East are complex. Distill the tension right now between Riyadh and Tehran.
Well, there has been historic tension driven by the Iranian Revolutionary regime's expansionist ambitions. And the Iranian regime in its early days had called for the overthrow of the Saudi government, had financed proxies all over the region, most recently had supported the Houthi militias attacking Saudi Arabia. So the relationship was not good. However, in the last couple of years, there has been a détente of sorts, godfathered by the Chinese. An agreement was signed between Saudi Arabia and Iran to reestablish diplomatic relations. And there has been ongoing diplomatic contact between Iranian officials and Saudi officials at a senior level in the last year. And Saudi officials have been warning the Iranian officials for the last few months and encouraging them to go the diplomatic route with the United States.
They did not.
But obviously, the Iranians decided otherwise.
They did not. And so it's a question of now what? What diplomacy would you suggest between Washington and Riyadh?
No, I think Washington and Riyadh are very much on the same wavelength and maintain a very close diplomatic relationship. I think Saudi Arabia's premier concern is that this does not escalate to a regional conflagration. And the hope would be that the Iranians don't go suicidal and either attack American facilities in the Gulf or even oil exporting facilities of the Arab countries on the other side of the Gulf. Iran would only do that really if it wanted to, damage the global economy in a massive way and was willing to pay a horrendous price itself, because that would, Saudi Arabia has told Iran that if Iran attacks its oil facilities, Saudi Arabia will hit back and take out Iranian oil facilities, other than the fact that the Americans would respond also robustly. So I think everybody's sitting and watching now to see how will the Iranians react. Ideally, they will react in a measured fashion. There's a small concern that there's a messianic strain among the Iranian leadership, and they might, commit sort of suicidal actions. And that obviously could cause a lot of problems.
Ali, to what extent was the American military operations and the aggressive nature of those operations last night, how much of a surprise did that come to your region of the world?
No, I think it was expected. I think they understood that this warning had been put out very, very clearly to the Iranians, and they advised the Iranians as much. In fact, yesterday there was a meeting between the Saudi foreign minister and the Iranian foreign minister in Istanbul, and again that was repeated. So it was expected. It was not a huge surprise that the Americans had made large contingency preparations, have moved a lot of planes and equipment from a very vulnerable airbase in Qatar to a airbase in Saudi Arabia that's much farther away from Iran. So again, they were prepared.
Ali, who, if anyone, has any influence over Iran? Is there some entity in the Middle East that can, urge caution and actually have the Iranians listen?
Maybe the Chinese actually would be the only ones that have any substantive influence over Iran, because they're the only people who buy Iranian oil, and they're Iran's, major international ally or friend at least. So China would have influence. Other than that, really, there isn't anybody that has influence over this government.
In the coming hours, and this goes again back to your book, The Saudi Kingdom, which is, folks, they can't emphasize enough how it links the culture into the immediate demographics and economy and politics of the region. What is the influence that Saudi's voice has upon the Persian Gulf nations, frankly, over the Arab world in Morocco? What influence does Saudi really have on this Sunday?
No, Saudi Arabia has a lot of influence over the surrounding Arab world. It maintains a very sort of senior stature. It helps them financially. It helps them politically. So I think it has quite a lot of influence. But at this stage, it doesn't have influence really over Iran, except to the extent that Iran would not want to burn the sort of recently established relations with
Right.
Saudi Arabia and with the rest of the Gulf,
If we,
which they could do by taking a suicidal step.
Ali, I'm interested to understand. I think Paul agrees with me. The theme this morning, Paul, that's been most mysterious is this phrase regime change in Iran. Does Ali Shahabi, does Saudi and the Arabs, do they want regime change from a theocracy back to 1979?
Look, they are not working for regime change because that's a very, very dangerous game and it usually backfires. But would they like a regime that focuses more on the Human Development Index of Iran rather than on power projection? Absolutely. So would they like a regime that probably matures with time and becomes much more focused on its internal development rather than causing trouble across the region? Absolutely. But certainly Saudi Arabia is not involved, nor does it support any active regime change activities at the moment.
Ali, Tom and I have been fortunate enough to speak to some Bloomberg News reporters on the ground in Israel, and they're reporting that there's a real sense within Israel that this is a special time in its history where they can significantly change the balance of power and secure a level of security they've not seen in a long time. Is that a feeling across the Middle East that this is a special time potentially for the region?
Well, not really, because the Gaza crisis continues and the Israelis are being a bit tone deaf or, blinkered if they think that solving the Iran problem but keeping the Gaza crisis with, starvation and innocent civilians dying every day, if that will bring any peace to them or to the region. So I think the Israelis, yes, they have an opportunity now if they have diminished Iran's threat to them. Maybe it makes them a bit more secure and more willing to take risks for peace. We don't see that from the current government, but maybe another government comes along that has that sort of vision.
An unfair question, Ali, but I have to ask it. If we've taken out this, that, and the other person in Iran, is there someone to take over for the Ayatollah at this point, given his age and the danger to his life?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
That's fair.
I mean, it all depends on the internal politics. It could be a theocrat, or if the regime is really shaken up, it could be the military that takes over, the Revolutionary Guard or other elements of the military, and it could become a military dictatorship.
Ali, all I can say is Jumana Bersachi said to me, can you ask Al?
That's why Bannon and Alex Jones are wrong. The way to handle this is knock out their nuclear capability, decapitate the theocratic regime. That means killing the Ayatollah. And Israel's already knocking out the military apparatus, not just with weapons, but also the generals. You have in the IMF, in the World Bank, in the UN come in and stabilize the region, make sure the economy keeps on getting money flowing in with the oil sales, stabilize their currency, and set up 3 branches of government with a constitution where the secular, educated population votes and establishes their government. See, the thing is that if you just knock out the nuclear facilities, then what the Ayatollah is going to do, if you just keep the Ayatollah alive, the Ayatollah is going to use cells and do worldwide terror on top of doing other terrorist activities against Israel and potentially even Saudi Arabia, on top of launching missiles. But over time, Israel is going to continue to degrade those capabilities. So if we listen to Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones, they basically don't want to get rid of the Ayatollah. They don't want regime change because they think it's the same thing as Iraq and Afghanistan, which is this is totally different. First, Iraq and Afghanistan didn't have nuclear weapons. Secondly, they didn't have an educated population like Iran is. Thirdly, those two societies weren't secular. A big part of Iran is secular. This can work, but the thing is that you have to stabilize the economy and their currency first. You get in the World Bank and the IMF and you get Iran in the orbit of the economy with the Western powers, you stabilize the nation, it becomes democratic, and not only that, now you have a multi-front war against China. And you have an ally that's an oil producer that you can turn off the spigot diplomatically and shut the oil supply to China. So if we have to go to war with China because of Taiwan, it's going to be easier. But if you do what Bannon and Alex Jones wants, no, just keep the regime there. Don't shoot down the nuclear capability. Don't shut it down. And keep the Ayatollah there because we're afraid. We're afraid. Do you think America first is going to stay America first if you're going to be afraid? That's not what leaders do. Leaders aren't afraid. They take risks. This is a time where you have to take risks. And because we're doing the right thing, we're going to be blessed. We didn't do the right thing in Afghanistan and Iraq. We went in false pretenses. That's why we failed. We were cursed. We're not cursed this time. And what other president is going to do this? You think a future president is going to be able to finish the job? It's only going to get worse. We need to get the job done now, not kick the can down the road. The Ayatollah has to be eliminated. And democracy needs to flourish in Iran. Now, does that mean that it's going to be, a cakewalk? No, it's not going to be a cakewalk. But it's going to take the international community to bring Iran into its orbit economically and away from China. This is the right thing to do. If you keep the Ayatollah there, then what do you do? What do you do? Maybe nuclear weapons are reconstituted or nuclear capability is reconstituted over time. You sure as hell don't have a democracy. And we pass on the torch to a new president that most likely will be weaker diplomatically, militarily, because God broke the mold when it came to Donald Trump. You're not going to get Donald Trump in J.D. Vance or Rubio. The time is now, or things would get worse. See, if you don't get the cancer out early, it metastasizes. This is a cancer in the world that needs to be rooted out before it metastasizes. But Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones would prefer to be America First isolationists, America First pacifists, and let it metastasize. That's the wrong policy. Wrong policy. So Stephen Bannon's going to say, well, we knock out the facilities and we didn't knock out, that was bad and the Ayatollah is going to come after us. This is the reason why DrPaulCottrell is saying you have to kill the Ayatollah too. You can't just knock out the nuclear facilities because the Ayatollah is going to rise up and attack us. But if you knock out the Ayatollah and the military apparatus is destroyed, then it gives a chance for Iran to rise up as a democracy. And that's what's supposed to happen. Iran isn't supposed to be a perpetual enemy of the Western world. It's actually supposed to be integrated in, but you have to kill negative Esau. But Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon and Tucker Carlson all want to keep the Ayatollah in power. Let the nuclear facilities, don't take risks and keep the nuclear facilities there. Don't rock the boat. How's that preventing the metastasizing of terrorism? This is why Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon are wrong. Just dead wrong. But because Trump didn't go all the way and knock out the Ayatollah, there is a potentiality of cells in the United States to be activated and we get attacked. It's very possible. I don't think it's going to happen, but there's a possibility of it happening. It's, it's possible and it's probable. But I have a feeling because of what is happening that that's not going to take place. But if it does, then Stephen Bannon is going to say, "See, I told you, by knocking out those nuclear facilities, I told you this was going to happen." Well, the other part of the equation, Stephen, is that you have to kill the Ayatollah too. And that's where Trump didn't go all the way. Trump is only halfway there. Now, maybe his intent is to knock out the Ayatollah. He just needs to have enough international relations political cover before he can do it. Okay, give him a little bit more time. There's enough destruction of his military where we can give a little bit more time to see if we should, when and how we're going to knock out the Ayatollah. And most likely it won't even be the United States. It's probably going to be Israel that does it. Because metaphysically, Benjamin kills Esau in the Bible. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's Benjamin. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu, isn't that really strange? Don't you see that this whole biblical play that we're, is playing out again in some sort of weird rhythm? But Stephen Bannon is America first, but he's really America first pacifist. And throughout many, many, many years, many decades, many eras, over 150 years or so, no more, close to 250 years, there's always been a group of people in the United States, even during the founding of the nation, where they were pacifists and they would prefer to align with the king instead of take risks. They would prefer to align with the redcoats than to actually align with George Washington. They preferred not to do anything than to stop the split of the nation between the North and the South. They would prefer not to get engaged in World War I or in World War II. Where do you think the world would be if we listened and allowed the pacifists to take hold and dictate our domestic or foreign policy? We wouldn't be the United States. Leaders lead, leaders take risks. Stephen Bannon is fucking wrong.
The government is urging those who want to leave to make contact with the Foreign Office as soon as possible. The Israeli government says around 22,000 tourists are seeking to be evacuated, but it's unclear how many are UK citizens. British Airways has now also suspended flights to Dubai and Qatar following the strikes. Those are your latest Tubing News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
All right, let's go to Al Jazeera, but before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, because according to Alex Jones, it's going to be Armageddon tomorrow. You're going to need a good night's sleep, so please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the good night formula. Why? Because it has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. By getting a good night's sleep, you're going to slow down the aging process. By getting a good night's sleep, you're going to be consolidating memory, and by getting a good night's sleep, you're going to be well rested in the morning. Chronic sleep deprivation will lead to problems neurologically, especially with memory. So it's very important to get those cycles of REM sleep to consolidate memory. By getting 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, because typically a cycle lasts for about an hour and a half. By getting those cycles of sleep, you're consolidating memory, you're detoxifying your central nervous system, and you're going to be well rested. Super important. So please go to my store and get the good night formula. Slow down the aging process because you don't want to look like Alex Jones. You want to look like DrPaulCottrell. And omega-3. Omega-3 will bring down systemic inflammation. It'll also help with your lipid profile. It's going to help bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. That means that you have less oxidized LDL, which means that you would have less plaque buildup. This helps with your cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, get the Good Night Formula and the omega-3. You're detoxifying your central nervous system and you're consolidating memory. You're helping with your memory. You're being well rested and you're helping with your cardiovascular health. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Also, what's very important is getting restful sleep will lead to lower cortisol levels. High cortisol levels, especially when it's chronic, will lead to immune suppression. You don't want that. You want good night's sleep, and high cortisol levels chronically will lead to damage to tissues. That ages you faster. So you want to bring that down. You want cortisol levels to go down. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Follow my protocol so you don't look like Alex Jones. Make sure that you use discount 5, you get $5 off. In addition, if you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Again, follow my protocol so you don't look like Alex Jones.
Well, on Capitol Hill on Monday, there's going to be a number of resolutions tabled in both chambers of Congress saying that they have to consider the War Act and they could also restrict future conflict and look for a resolution. Now, under the Constitution, it's up to Congress to declare war. But you go back to Reagan attacking Gaddafi, you think about Clinton and Obama, they have all ordered strikes somewhere. So it's unlikely that this would be considered to be a breach of the Constitution. But certainly, Congress wants to talk about it. What's more concerning for Donald Trump is the split in his own party. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman from Georgia, who's considered one of Donald Trump's staunchest supporters in Congress, is saying that there is now the possibility, excuse me, that the United States could will have to consider the possibility of terrorist action, her words, against the United States because of what they've done in Iran. And Donald Trump has got now to try and convince his supporters that this was actually a win. Of course, he was a man who campaigned very vigorously on the fact that he wasn't going to get America involved in what he described as stupid wars in the Middle East. Now he's got to try and convince his supporters that he hasn't just lit the fuse on America getting involved in another one.
Okay, all right, Alan, many thanks indeed. We'll let you go and get a glass of water, and we'll speak more with you in the coming hours. Well,
Now, like I said, I keep on saying this. I've been saying it since October 7th of 2023. Satan is attached to negative Esau. Ayatollah is part of that soul root. Satan knows that when negative Esau dies, Satan dies too. That's part of this whole new beginning, this messianic era, all right? But Satan's really smart, smarter than anyone on the planet together. And guess what? Satan knows this, so he's going to try to convince people not to kill negative Esau. So you have the international community demonizing what Trump is doing, because Trump is moving towards killing the Ayatollah. You also have the international community demonizing Israel. Why? Because Satan doesn't want to die. And Satan can convince people to think a certain way. Isn't it really odd that when you look at the council at the UN, the Security Council, that there is a camera that rotates in that circle and it looks like an eye and it's covered in black cloth? This is a physical representation of Satan. Now, that sounds really wacky, sounds really out of this world kind of stuff. But through the UN, there is policy mechanism to promote Satan to remain in power, to maintain that energy source from the negative Esau. Now, some people would say, well, why are you saying that the UN needs to come in to help stabilize the economy and to help stabilize the country? You need to bring in the IMF into Iran and the World Bank to stabilize the economy and the currency and to give them loans. And then you have the UN to actually bring in democracy, all right? All right? But there's a danger there. And that danger is that through these organizations, Satan has, through this international entanglement, has attached itself and is getting energy from it. So there is a little bit of a danger there. But like I said, leaders take risks. Stephen Bannon doesn't sound like a leader. Alex Jones sounds like a pacifist. he sure as hell doesn't know how to use his supplements so he can slow down the aging process, because Alex Jones looks 15 years older than I am. But I'm older than Alex Jones. So please go to my store and take the supplements that I take so you don't look like Alex Jones. And stop eating the fried chicken, because he eats way too much fried chicken.
The policies of Israel and how it's dragging the United States into this war, just as President Pezeshkian was saying earlier today. As for Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, he was clear that there are many cards on the table, and Iran would reserve its right to choose the right card. Even when he was asked on exiting the Non-Proliferation Treaty, he was clear criticizing this treaty, but at the same time keeping away from saying whether his country is going to exit it, just as the threat was going on over the past months and years. Also, the IRGC just stated once again its position towards attacking Israel and the United States bases without saying something clear in this regard, just that these bases are not going to be safe. This is all part of a narrative or a rhetoric that is accumulating here in Tehran, waiting for the final decision by Iran's Supreme National Security Council that is responsible for putting any action within the determinants of the country's national security.
Okay, and at this stage, what details do we have as to what damage these US attacks caused these nuclear sites?
Well, given the fact no one has access to these sites, we are depending more on what's being circulating or what the officials are saying. Now, in general, there's an acknowledgement, a clear acknowledgement that these sites were hit, and they were hit in a very strong way. However, when it comes to what was hit, this is the big question here, especially with reports and sat images showing more than 20 trucks or lorries close to the site, and then moving from Fordo during the 20th and the 21st. This could give an indication that a lot of stockpile and technology and equipments were moved outside.
Okay, Ali, great stuff. Do stay with us. I just want to go over to Amman now, where we can speak to Bernard Smith for the view on what's happening in Israel. And Bernard, Israel did not let up its attacks on military targets in Iran on Sunday. What was hit?
No, it didn't, Laura. Israel's military says it hit dozens of targets in Iran early on Sunday. It says they used 30 jets to hit, including the Imam Hussein Strategic Missile Command Center. From there, they said 60 long-range missiles had been fired.
Now think about that. U.S. just bombed them with a bunch of B-2 bombers. Israel's flying in and out, bombing facilities. You think the Iranian military is strong? No, they're melting away. We probably will see the overthrow of the Ayatollah within this year. Now the question is will there be cells, like terrorist cells within the United States activated? Possibly. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of terrorist drone activity that takes place. Kind of a 9/11-like moment. But do not fear. Do not fear. Because Americans that fear, you don't even deserve to be an American. Because it's part of the ethos in America to not be fearful. All right? And that's the reason why Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones are wrong. Because they're fearful of the Ayatollah. Don't be fearful of the Ayatollah. Why? Why? He's negative Esau. Unless the people that are talking, like Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones, are part of negative Esau. See, people have soul roots, and that's where they get their energy from. Now, if they are part of negative Esau, and negative Esau is going to die, then they are going to die with him. Now, that could be a metaphor of physically death, or spiritual death, or material death. But Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon will fall. Mark my words on this. Watch.
20 to 30 years.
We are thankful, I think, all the people in Israel, that Trump is keeping his promise to keep Israel safe and the Western world safe and Americans safe, and of course all the countries around Iran.
And another good indicator of Israeli sentiment, the stock market. It's closed on record highs, up 1.8% at the close today, 8% increase overall on the last week. Laura.
Many thanks for bringing us that update from Amman. Let's now go back to Ali, because on the diplomatic front, Ali, we've got Iran's foreign minister.
I don't know what he's saying about the markets, because I thought the markets don't open up until 6 at 6. He's talking about like Friday. He's talking about what happened on Friday. I think in the Asian market, we're going to see equities go down. Most likely treasuries will go up. I would not be surprised to see a little bit of uptick of the US dollar to strengthen. And oil probably is going to go up. Now, if this starts to calm down, I think oil will start to drift down. Now, the question is, how much is it going to go up? Now, it's been hovering around at the 74 mark. Now, we had a contract switch between the July contract futures and the August contract. And there's backwardation, meaning that the July contract was selling at about $75 a share, or $75 a barrel. All right. Now, in the August contract, it's selling at about 74, 73 handle. It's backwardated. There's backwardation, not contango. So according to the futures market, it should be going down in the near future here. So I suspect that there's going to be a spike up, most likely tonight, especially when Europe gets online. And then when New York session starts tomorrow morning at 9:30, Monday morning at 9:30, then you'll see an additional spike. Now, if futures are trading at 74 or 75, we might see like 78, 79, maybe even touch 80. I think to break the 80 barrier is going to be tough, but we're going to have to see what happens. If this continues to escalate, if they hit strike groups, if Iran hits a strike group in the United States or hits Saudi Arabia's oil fields, then you're talking above $80 a barrel. But I don't think that they have the military capability anymore. I think we're seeing the actual melting of Iran. Now, if you listen to Scott Ritter and Alex Jones and Bannon, they all said that Israel was going to fall. Well, really? Really? Or they were going to be in a quagmire and it's going to be like, their version of Vietnam. Gaza has been totally destroyed, completely destroyed. There's nothing left of Gaza. Hamas is degraded radically. Hezbollah is incapacitated. Syria melted away. Do you think that this is the prowess of the Israelis or a blessing for the Israelis? This happened because there's a blessing taking place. And now you're seeing the rapid melting away of Iran. No one could have, all these experts like Mearsheimer and all these international gurus and military experts said this was impossible. Well, guess what? When you lead and you're a leader and you take risks and you're doing it the right way and you're doing it for the right reasons and you get a blessing, it is obvious that Israel's been blessed. There's no doubt that there was a blessing that came down. Not only that, even Trump feels it. Trump was Esau, and he became negative. He became positive Esau and broke away from negative Esau at Butler, Pennsylvania during the assassination attempt. And there was a blessing that came down, and he felt it. And when you listen to the last night's speech from Trump after they bombed these facilities, he thanked God. And he said he loved God. And, our country loves you. I'm telling you, this negative ESAW and positive ESAW that I've been telling everyone about since October 7th of 2023 is happening in real time. And Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones thinks that they know it. Wrong, 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 wrong. CSIS thinks they understand it through some Westphalian international bullshit. No, they got it wrong too.
But the situation there is under control right now. But if there is any threat to Russian personnel working there, Russia is ready to immediately evacuate its citizens from there. And Vladimir Putin raised the issue of Russia's personnel safety at the Bushehr plant with Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump. And despite the hostilities, the Russian employees continue to work in Bushehr.
Okay, many thanks. Yulia Shapovalova bringing you the latest there from Moscow.
All right, people need to start paying attention to me because I know what I'm talking about. In 5 years, you're going to see a lot of your social group, maybe even family members, starting to have cognitive decline. They're going to have loss of memory. They're going to have tremors. They're going to have gait issues, walking and balancing problems. Pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. This is part of the aftershock of 2020. Now, you need to protect your brain. Now, how do you do it? It's a holistic approach. Proper diet, proper exercise, filter your water, make sure you stay away from processed foods, stay away from chemicals and pesticides. Try to eat organic when you can. Take the proper supplementation. Super important. Make sure you get a lot of sleep. All right. You can take what is the lessons learned in sports medicine and anti-aging medicine to mitigate some of the problems that people are going to start to have. All right. You got to bring down that inflammation because chronic inflammation at the vascular, at the cerebral and vascular level is going to cause neural issues and neural stress. But there's also supplements that can help to protect the neuron. All right, let's talk about those. NAD plus is a supplement that will boost up the NAD plus levels. That'll improve your energy. NAD plus also helps to repair DNA damage. Super important. Pay attention to me. And NAD plus protects your neurons. So if you're 40 years of age, you better start listening and start to do this. Ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can purchase. There's nothing better than what I have on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. It's going to help the health of the mitochondria. So you can have more energy in those neurons. And guess what? It protects neurons. So by stacking these together, it's one of the vectors to help protect the neurons. Another thing to do, like I said, is that holistic approach. By having better blood flow, you're going to create a better microenvironment. When you learn things and you stay away from screen time and you get better blood flow, you're creating a microenvironment for positive neuroplasticity. That means that you'll have your dendritic connections more, you'll have more cognition. You'll think faster and you'll have better memory. And you got to bring down that inflammation because at the inflammation at the cerebral level will start to degrade the myelin sheath. You want to bring that down. And you need to, again, better blood flow to get the nutrients in that microenvironment. Now, what's going to happen in 5 years, people will start having vascular issues where it will contract and you'll start to slowly destroy those neurons. Also, there's chronic inflammation that's starting to build up. And what's going to happen is the myelin sheaths will start to degrade and your electrical signaling between neurons will start to falter and you'll be starting to think slower. The 4 modalities of exercise: cardio for better blood flow and also to help with the baroreceptors and chemoreceptors, but also resistance training. Resistance training not only builds muscle and helps with bone density, but you're activating certain types of neurons and you're helping with your kinematics. When you do stretching exercises, that's activating a different type of neuron at the end of your muscles. So when you contract a muscle, that's using a certain type of neuron. When you stretch, you're activating another set of neurons. And balancing is activating that cerebellum and keeping that healthy. And that's super important for gait issues, balancing, and for tremors. So better start paying attention. In 5 years, you're going to start seeing your social network in your world, even at work or at home. You're going to start seeing people in your environment having neural problems. So you better pay attention because it's coming.
Country director at Plan International Aid Organization. She says Gaza is in danger of being forgotten about during the attacks on Iran.
It's very important to keep eyes on Gaza. It is what's happening today in Gaza is a manufactured catastrophe, and it is a continuous violation of the international humanitarian law. We see today that the Israeli scheme for the delivery of limited supplies shuts down completely the UN-led humanitarian operations.
Like I said, this thing's going back to biblical borders. Nothing's stopping it. The bullshit is over after October 7th.
Men have keep it at 3.67, by 2015 at 20%, and then more recently they got it up to 60%, right? Since February early this year, right? And I've touched on how Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis and Syrian, rebels have all been annihilated by or degraded by Israel. Iran's backs up against the wall. They've increased their enriched uranium by 50%, up to 408 kilograms. And at the 60% level, to get up to 90% for a nuclear weapon, it's very technically very simple and fast. So that is what was observed. On the 12th of June, the IAEA had found that they were in non-compliance. So what we're witnessing here is not just some random, we feel like it, attack. This is a very real threat that has
It's
been
as simple as this.
identified.
They had 60% enrichment, they had 83% enrichment, and they had a whole lot. It's not just the percentage of enrichment of uranium, it is the quantity. There is no reason for civilian purposes to have as much of it as they do, unless you're going to build a bomb. It's that simple. Okay, let's go to Ian Bremmer on his take on the U.S.-Iran strike. I have not heard this video. I have no idea what his perspective is.
A Sunday, which of course means things are blowing up, and they are. The United States has formally entered the war in Iran. They've been and have been very supportive of Israel all the way through, providing intelligence and military support, and a green light on Prime Minister Netanyahu's decision to start the bombing of Iran a week ago. But that now expands with the United States with bombing attacks on the deep underground facility at Fordo, the nuclear facility, and got missiles against two other nuclear facilities. It was always likely that this was going to happen. We've been talking about this over the past week. Trump wanted negotiations with the Iranians, but they had to be negotiations that would lead to Iran's willingness to completely dismantle their nuclear capabilities once the Israeli strike. That's where Trump and his team that's where they went. And the Iranians would much rather force the Americans to destroy those capabilities and get greater support and respect from their own population than capitulate, look incredibly weak, and have it verifiably dismantled. So the negotiations avenue, once the Israelis start attacking, is not going anywhere. There's also been lots of pressure from Israel. Trump's had a few phone calls directly with the Israeli Prime Minister over the past week, and they were quite contentious. Netanyahu was strongly pushing Trump to end negotiations and talks with Iran, really wanted the Americans to enter the war, and Trump finally agreed, and now the two are at war together. More broadly, Trump is meant to be the peacetime president. He wants to be the president where no new wars start under him. He actually ends wars. He talks a lot about wanting to get a Nobel Peace Prize. We've seen a bunch of that over the
Isn't it
weekend.
amazing that no one is talking about the solar roots that were written down 2,000 years ago, and now this is all going to play out? Israel's Jacob. The United States is positive Esau and part of Jacob. Iran is negative Esau. Ishmael is Saudi Arabia. And you're seeing it play out, just like how the Zohar wrote it. Now, people would say, what are you talking about? Well, you need to read the Zohar. You probably need to read it 2 or 3 times to fully understand it, because it's extremely hard to understand. But the point here is this. People are not paying attention to what's playing out that was written 2,000 years ago. So the United States aligning with Israel to knock out Iran is going to lead to lasting peace in the Middle East. And there's going to be this positive Esau, Jacob, and Ishmael. And you know what's going to happen in the Middle East? The Middle East, after this is all said and done, the Middle East is going to be the most technological area of the world. Now, people would say, how the hell do you, it's going to surpass Silicon Valley in the United States? Yeah. It's going to surpass China? Yeah. Think about where the United States was back in the 1700s and where England was. People would say, there's no way that the United States would be as powerful as England back in, let's say, 1740 or even 1730. Just look at 1800s. No one would have thought that China would have been as strong as it is today. I'm telling you, the future is going to be the Middle East. It's going to be the most technological area of the world.
You know, he's so far this term 0 for 3 on his big efforts at negotiations. He's failed to get the Russians to accept the ceasefire, and that war continues and expands. Has failed to get the Israelis to accept a durable ceasefire in Gaza. They got a first phase, and now they're at war again, and that occupation continues to expand. And now a failure at his effort to get a nuclear negotiation with the Iranians. And instead, the United States and Israel are striking the country together. But to be fair, this is, at least at this moment, this is not the Americans beginning a large-scale grinding, drag-out, Ken Burns-style war, which would be strongly opposed by most Americans and a lot in Trump's own base, but rather the sort of very, very spectacular couple of major strikes and done TikTok-style war, which Trump's base can certainly get behind. And remember, Trump has done this before against Iran. He was late to pull the trigger during his first term after the American bases in the region were taking attacks, after Saudi Arabia's most important and the region's most important oil refinery in Abqaiq was struck by Iranian drones. It didn't do a lot of damage. It was more of a symbolic capabilities display strike. But still, Trump did not respond immediately under a lot of pressure from the Israelis, from the Gulf allies, the UAE. I remember talking to those leaders, and they were really angry that Trump wasn't doing anything against Iran. And finally, he orders the assassination of the head of the Iranian Defense Forces, Qasem Soleimani. And that's a really big deal. It's certainly an escalation. And the Iranian response was, very angry, very assertive, and then do virtually nothing. Some small symbolic attacks against American bases that were meant to not cause significant damage. And that was the end of that. So the Iranians lost that one. That's what Trump expects again this time. He's gotten a lot of inbound briefings over the past days. And the biggest concern, and did delay him in pulling the trigger ultimately, was the vulnerability of American servicemen and women, specifically on the ground in Iraq, to Iranian direct strikes, but also strikes from Shia militias who are well armed and capable and could certainly cause a lot of casualties. Also, secondarily, but important, from Houthis in Yemen, who could very easily, just across the channel in the Red Sea, engage in strikes against American forces at the base in Djibouti. So that's a real concern. Almost certainly going to be some kind of strikes against American bases and forces there. But if it's done by Iranian proxies and it doesn't cause a lot of damage, specifically if it doesn't lead to American servicemen and women getting killed in large number, it is plausible that this is kind of the peak of what the United States does. And then it's not the U.S. in ongoing war. Rather, it's a big win. It's not peace, but it's a big win. For Trump, it's an even bigger win for the Israeli prime minister. So that's where we are. Now, that answers one of the big questions is how the Iranians will respond. And what you're not hearing from me is the Iranians disrupting shipping traffic through the Straits of Hormuz or going after and destroying major Gulf energy capabilities, which would bring the prices well over 100, would take weeks to effectively clear and respond to, though the U.S. now has more military equipment in the Gulf, both air and naval.
Have you noticed that all these people that are experts, they seem to overshoot how long it takes to actually reduce this threat? And like I said, this is different than what happened post 9/11 when we went into Afghanistan and Iraq. This is totally different. And throughout this whole thing, all the experts said it was not going to happen, that it was impossible to do. It was impossible to root out the terrorism. It was impossible to destroy the proxies from Iran and to destroy Iran. It was never going to happen, or it would take too long or too expensive. This all started on October 7th. And look at where we're at today, where we are seeing the melting away of Iran. Do you really think that there's that much left of Iran? And if they even had the balls, which I don't think they do, but let's just say they did and they started laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz, don't you think that there would be a rapid deployment of our Navy and Air Force to destroy any capability left in Iran? And not only that, would they actually block the Strait of Hormuz if the oil needs to flow to China? So, like I said, the stars are aligned in such a way where the blessing is coming to Israel and the United States and not to Iran. Now, what's really strange here is that we're in June 22nd, right? And so we're in the cycle where Jacob's soul root gets the most energy. After July, so the beginning of August, that's where the soul root of Esau starts to ascend. All bad things happen. When you look at the history of the United States, bad things seems to happen around September and October. Well, guess what? September and October, especially October, is the zenith month of the strength of Esau. So knocking out capability during when Jacob has the most energy for the year is the best. I've been saying this since October 7th of 2023, all right? The zenith is April, actually, for Jacob. But the point here is that Jacob's strength for the year is starting to wane, and Esau's strength is going to start to ascend. So there's a danger point for the United States in September and October. This is why it's so important to knock out the nuclear facilities now, before August, and destroy the Ayatollah. Or you're going to have to wait for the next wave, and that next wave doesn't start until February of 2026. But these experts know better.
Point since the war in Iraq, so they are prepared for that. But as long as Iran's critical energy infrastructure is itself up and running, largely unscathed, and that remains the case as of today, I think it's very unlikely that the Iranians would take a big move to shut down oil transit. We've heard certainly threats in that direction from the Iranian leadership. That's very different from taking that action. But then there's a different question, which is, to what extent are the Iranians making rational, consolidated decisions? So far, for the last week, they have. And, you know, the supreme leader is alive, though the Israeli leadership, at least the defense minister, has...
He's hiding in a bunker and shitting his pants because he's afraid of a B-2 bomber.
Said that they intend to not allow him to continue to stay in place after some Israeli civilians were hit on the ground by Iran, missiles that got through, some of the few missiles that have gotten through. You know, do we think that after Iran's military leadership has been targeted and assassinated, and so people that are now making military decisions are in new positions, are they still going to be restrained? Are they going to act together? Might there be rogue decision-making from small numbers of people that are feeling that they might not have long to be around in Iran to take attacks themselves? And here we could be talking about targeted assassinations against military leaders in the region, American military leaders in the region, something the Iranians certainly have a lot of human intel on, engage in a lot of espionage to support. Might we see major terrorist attacks, or might we see a strike or two on shipping that is significant, even if it doesn't shut down the Straits of Hormuz, because it's ordered by a rogue faction in the Iranian military leadership? I have no idea. Of course, no one does, but it's far more likely in the fog of war, as Iran's capabilities are getting weaker and as their leadership is growing more desperate. So counting on continued restraint and rationality from the Islamic Republic strikes me as a harder thing to do, given what we've
I think
seen.
he's missing the point. Israel knocked out their offensive and defensive capability. Now, they knocked out their defensive capability more than offensive, but they're running out of munitions. So it's not about irrationality, Dr. Bremer. What it is it's actually the melting of the regime. They're running out of missiles.
Over this weekend. And then finally, there's the question of where this is all going longer term. Everyone's asking, is this, really a strategy from the Israelis of regime change? And the answer is no, because the Israelis don't have the capability to bring about regime change. You can't do that from the air. You can't do that just with disinformation. That would require massive boots on the ground that no one is considering.
This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. It's so different than Iraq and Afghanistan, but all that think that, these talking heads and gurus of international policy, they get it wrong. They're getting it wrong. Iran's theocratic regime has been written down 2,000 years ago that it will fall. You don't need boots on the ground. What you need is institutions coming in after you overthrow the regime, because you've already, what did Israel do? Israel knocked out its general class. Not only did they destroy the A team, they destroyed the B team and the C team and the D team. And they're in the process of destroying the E team. Don't you get it? They don't have an apparatus anymore to transmit from the Ayatollah to actually weapons of war, because Israel cut the legs off. And this is the reason why I keep on saying that the World Bank and the IMF can stabilize their currency and their economy. And you bring in the UN as a special team to boot up democracy with the secular educated class, which is very large in Iran. Some of the most intelligent engineers, most capable engineers I've ever met were from Iran. All right? This can be done, and you don't need boots on the ground. Why do we assume that boots on the ground have to happen? Because one, you're going to have a rising up of the secular the secular part of society. The military apparatus is being degraded, and the Ayatollah will be eliminated. So there's no more imam, there's no more Ayatollah, and the Iranian military, which is the power structure that keeps the society down, is being degraded by the Israelis. You don't need boots on the ground. Now, what's going to happen is you may have some factions within Iran in clusters, in local clusters, that may be trying to gain control against the secular movement. But that's when the secular movement has to rise up and protect their freedoms. There's going to be somewhat of a civil war there, but it can be stabilized. It can be stabilized, and a big part of it, you stabilize it economically, and it can flourish. You don't need these big boots on the ground like we did in Afghanistan and Iraq. Peacekeeping force maybe from the UN, but the thing is I don't see this like big. I literally think that you're going to be able to degrade Iran from the sky. Now, it's not because of the prowess of the military of the United States or even of Israel. It's a blessing that's been given to the military apparatus of Israel and the United States. That's the key point here. The blessing wasn't there for Iraq and Afghanistan because we went there in false pretenses. And when you do things in false pretenses, you're not going to get a blessing. But if you're doing it for the right reasons, you get a blessing. It's that simple. It's that simple. And all the gurus out there thought this was impossible. But we're literally seeing that whole Islamic terrorism starting to melt away. Now, what's really weird about the metaphysics of this is that Israel had to be punished first. The secular movement in Israel had to be punished. Because if you think about most of the people that died on October 7th and the ones that were hostages during October 7th and beyond, they were secular. There was a punishment that was taking place. All right, because they weren't following Torah. But like I said, these countries, some will get cursed first and then blessed, and then others will be blessed and then cursed. And Iran is on the other side now. They're going to get cursed. And these gurus think that they know they know it because they read some sort of international relations book that was written 10 years ago and didn't even bother to read something that was written 2,000 years ago saying how this was going to all play out. So when he says he doesn't know, the reason why he doesn't know is because he didn't do a thorough lit review. Dr. Bremer.
Importantly, it would require over 90 million Iranians to rise up effectively against a very brutal, repressive, and capable regime, at least on the domestic side. And
really? Is it that capable? Is it that capable? Really? Is it that capable? When the Israelis keep on knocking out their military apparatus? Is it? I think he's missing the point here.
Anytime soon. This is not Syria's Assad without the money and the capacity to keep an effectively repressive military in place. So much more likely that you have a radical regime on their back foot internationally that will support more insurgents to the extent that they can. Certainly they have much less to lose in the sense that their potential deterrents are all gone. So the Israelis can continue to strike them with impunity, and anyone that is leading the Iranian regime in terms of the theocracy and the military knows that they can be targeted and killed at any moment. And again, how they behave as a consequence of that is more likely to be unhinged and less rational than what we have seen, what we have experienced from the Iranians so far. So that's where we are today. Lots of moving pieces, lots to follow, and I'll be on it over the course of the week. Hope everyone's well.
I'm glad he's on it because he's so accurate. what's really important is to pay attention to how the financial markets are going to start digesting this information when the Asian session opens up. I suspect equities are going to be down. It probably will start to stabilize about halfway or 3/4 of the way into the Asian session. And then you're going to see more volatility as London comes online for trading. And then when the United States comes online, there's going to be further volatility. So I suspect that oil prices will spike, but I don't think that they'll stay elevated. I think that it'll spike and then start to go down. But we got to see, because it's, you know, this all happened on the weekend and all the markets are closed. Now, what is interesting as an indicator, you know, is that if you look at Bitcoin is now at 99. It broke 100. All right. So that's usually trading. It's usually trading with positive correlation with equities. So Bitcoin could be canary in the coal mine saying equities are really going to sell off. Now, with the United States equities, what that basically means is that we are going to be well off the 6,000 level. So that's going to be a resistance level for the S&P 500. And the support level is going to be testing 5,750. Now, who on the fucking planet can give you that level of detail? Dr. Bremer can't. John Bolton can't. Stephen Bannon can't. And sure as hell Alex Jones can't. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the supplements I have, because I don't want you to turn into an Alex Jones. Get the vitamin C and magnesium. Vitamin C and magnesium is dual purpose. It will help with your skin, it will help with your immune system, and magnesium will help with your brain function. You better pay attention to your brain function, because in 5 years, you're going to see an awful lot of people that are going to have Swiss cheese brains. Olive leaf extract, it's dual purpose. Brings down inflammation. That's very important for your immune system, your cardiovascular system. And remember what I said? If you keep inflammation down at the cerebral level, then you're helping the neural health. And olive leaf extract helps control your lipid profile. It helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. That's super important, because less LDL means less oxidized LDL. That means less plaque buildup. So please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract and stack it with the vitamin C and magnesium. So you're helping with your skin, your immune system, and your brain function, and your cardiovascular system. It's a great stack. And don't be an Alex Jones. Alex Jones is younger than Dr. Paul Cottrell. Now, look at Alex Jones and look at Dr. Paul Cottrell. Whose protocol should you be following? The proof is in the pudding. And Alex, stop eating chicken, fried chicken. It's making you fat.
And they may even have some ideas of what it could be. But is that acceptable to the region to have a coalition or somewhat a new power in Iran backed by Israel? And that's clearly not what the United States want at the moment. So we may see there a bit of difference between Netanyahu agenda, which is being more political, and Trump agenda, which is more strategic. Trump is actually letting a little door open for the Ayatollah regime. If they stop looking for nuclear weapons, they may continue to exist. That's his bet. His bet is that Ali Khamenei, the great leader of Iran, will come forward and say, we are ready to stop our nuclear program. If it happens, Trump will be the big winner. If it doesn't happen, he will be dragged on a conflict, and Netanyahu will have the upper hand.
We'll have to keep our eye on what's coming in the next few days. Richard, thank you very much for joining us on set. That is Richard Worley, the France-Europe correspondent for Swiss publication Blick. And that's it for this edition here on Around the World on France 24. Stay with us. We'll be back with more news.
In the next French Connections,
we've got about
to the
50 million followers. We're in the billions of views.
and we're a small town.
We always felt like our content was all about
Iran's secretive Fordo fuel enrichment plant is buried deep underground and considered virtually unreachable by conventional aerial weapons. It's not yet confirmed what exactly the US used to attack the nuclear facility, but experts do say the only known way to destroy it would be to use a massive bunker-busting bomb.
The GBU-57, better known as a bunker buster or the massive ordnance penetrator. And the US is the only country in the world that has them.
The GBU-57, which is the massive ordnance penetrator that's being discussed heavily in terms of American involvement in Iran, can actually penetrate up to 200 feet before detonating its ordnance. It is the only weapon in anyone's arsenal globally that's able to successfully target and potentially even eliminate facilities like Fordo. It was designed originally with the intent of attacking and destroying targets specifically built into mountains.
The Fordo facility southwest of Tehran is at the heart of Iran's nuclear program. It includes hundreds of centrifuges, reportedly buried up to 90 meters underground inside a mountain. And according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the site has been used by Iran to enrich uranium to 60%, well beyond what's required for civilian purposes.
Let's bring us up with the latest analysis from William Alberg. He's from the Pacific Forum of Foreign Policy Research Institute. He's also a former director of NATO's Arms Control Center. With me in the studio, Shani Razan is our Middle East expert. Let's begin with what damage has been done. We're now getting images through satellite images, I believe. Do they show up much?
Yes. So I've just seen imagery that shows that the entrances have been sealed with dirt, and the sites, the most critical part of the facility, you can see actual holes, and it looks like a boring hole has been created, like by a post digger or something like that. Incredibly precise, and so it looks like these bombs really did do some serious damage.
You say precise. You say bombs. Does it take more than one? And how precise are these huge bombs?
They're very, very precise. I mean, down to the meter. And so really the desire is, you put one in and then you follow it, if you can, down the exact same hole, if not really close to it, so that you can really, really dig in there.
Chani, what about Israel's take here? It launched this campaign surely knowing that it was going to get those bunker-busting bombs from the US.
Well, surely hoping. There was no certainty around that. And actually what we've seen is a turnaround, somewhat of a turnaround by the Americans, because in the first days they were quite clearly distinguishing between themselves and what Israel has done, sort of unilaterally going at it. But as more and more successes were piling up on the Israeli side, the Americans seem to be, definitely Trump, kind of more eager and tempted to bandwagon on that and say, we have now control over the Iranian airspace, and very much. And it seems like also a very big part of Trump deciding to go on with it is understanding that the threats for American airplanes has been mostly eliminated, that Iran is very much weakened, and therefore the risks for any complications is smaller. And that's just for the immediate attack. Of course, the repercussions on the longer strategic stage are still there, but that definitely, no doubt, that the Israeli military successes have helped the Americans decide to bring in the final boot. So they hope, at least, that will be the final hit that will seal the deal the way.
So what's next? What else could Israel realistically achieve in this campaign?
Well, officially, Israel says this has lots of targets still on its list. I mean, we still need to see exactly what kind of damage has been done. But I think for Israel, the biggest achievement is the symbolic meaning behind bringing the Americans in, far more than the exact damage that's been done or not been done to the Iranian nuclear sites. The cementing of the U.S.-American ties in such a strong way, the signal that it sends out, I think that's definitely something that Israel would be very proud of and very much wanting to achieve, and would also be talking about, again, the ripple effects, where we're heading, what we're talking about strategically. I think Iran has seen in the last 2 years, or almost 2 years, 20 months since October 7th, that all the strategy that it called the ring of fire that it tried to build around Israel with its proxies, that had failed. But not only that, you've had earlier in this talk conversations about Turkey, about Russia, about other so-called allies of Iran, neither one of them as close as the Americans are to Israel.
But William, what can we expect from Iran, do you think?
Well, I mean, the choices are really stark for them. They can either try asymmetric escalation, so anything from hitting shipping to terrorist attacks around the world, somehow to try to strike back at the United States in a way that would be attention-grabbing. But of course, the risk of that is they could lose the entire regime. The United States has done this in a very limited way. They have not gone all in terms of attacking different sites around Iran, and they could. So for Iran, really the best option now is negotiation, because I think the nuclear issue at least can only really be solved through negotiation.
Because we talk about this conflict being a couple decades in the making. Israel being seemingly extremely well prepared and having the US backing, but Iran, the people have been left to look after themselves, haven't they? But Iran does have also time on its side in that it's been waiting for this to happen over the past 2 decades.
Well, I think so much of Iran's strategy recently has collapsed. You've mentioned the Ring of Fire and how much Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, all these strategic defeats to their proxy strategy has collapsed. The effectiveness of missile defense to stop Iranian missiles from striking Israeli targets, not 100% effective, but far more effective than a lot of people guessed. So the number of options that Iran has going forward are just really, really limited now.
Okay, what
I
about
also
Israel?
want to add to that the fact that exactly, I mean, I think for Iran, the assumption was if you hear not just Khamenei, but also other Arab leaders like Hezbollah, leader Nasrallah, who was assassinated by Israelis, their assumption is that Israel is a weak, crumbling society, that is, they either call it a spider web or, Iran has this countdown until Israel kind of collapses. I think they're valuing, not just Israeli sophistication, technology, planning, but also the cohesiveness of the Israeli society. Despite 20 months of a very bitter war in Gaza, with lots of, that is still ongoing, and lots of sacrifices. Israel and the Israeli leadership and the Israeli people now are adamant at pursuing this goal because they feel that this is an immediate existential threat to Israel, and there's a shift in paradigm when it comes to Israel's security perception and working assumption. After October 7th, Israel has very little to zero tolerance to any threats anymore. Definitely not coming from Iran, who has been the one sponsoring and giving trainings to all those proxies who have shown themselves to be the most deadly when it comes to Israeli citizens. And there is great support for that in Israel, I think far more than the Iranians have expected.
Mm-hmm. And we're over a week into this war. Are both sides slowly depleting their weapons, or can they both hold out for a lot longer than we think?
There are real questions about the depth of Israel's what we call magazine capacity, the number of defense launchers that they have available. But there are also doubts about how many precisely missiles survived in Iran against Israel's threat, which was really very well timed to destroy storage and access to storage. So on the one hand, there are strict limits in terms of what Israel can do to defend itself in missile terms. On air campaign, there's plenty in the tank left for Israel. So I think they can continue to conduct military operations against Iran for quite some time. It really is a question of what's left in Iran and how well can they use it and coordinate it as they continue to lose military and political leadership.
Yeah, in Israel, there's this meticulous counting of how many rockets are being launched by every because they want to see that Iran, they want to hope that what they're seeing is that Iran is weakening, and the feeling is that Israel can outwit Iran and succeed in that aspect, even though the Israeli economy is completely shut down. Israeli, life is basically stopped. But the idea is that the hope is that it's going to maintain, it will maintain, it can last longer than Iran. This is the hope, at least in Israel. And it seems like there's no doubt that Iran is struggling to respond, at least for Israel, as much as they were expecting. We hear reports that when the cabinet was discussing the possible scenarios overall with Iran, they expected at least 400 to 8,000 civilian casualties in the Israeli big cities. We are now talking about 25. So for Israel, this is a great success, and it gives it a boost to keep on going.
Hundreds on the other side. Of course, will there be more attacks from the US?
I don't think so. I think Trump has done as much as he cares to do so far. You know, he's under tremendous pressure from his own party not to engage in unlimited combat. So it sounds like everything we've heard so far is this was a limited operation to finish off the nuclear facilities, and that's it. Now the pressure returns to the Iranian regime to decide whether or not it negotiates, under what terms it negotiates, does it have leverage, has it lost its leverage? So I do think the next step is negotiations, and if those negotiations fail, then the threat is real that the United States would join in more of a decapitation operation with the Israelis.
William, the other thing I'd like to know is the US can try knocking out nuclear facilities, but what about the knowledge? I mean, scientists have also been targeted, and military generals, but the knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of people involved in the nuclear enterprise in Iran. And so killing a couple of the top scientists looks good on a headline, but it doesn't erase all of the knowledge, all of the expertise that Iran has gained in its nuclear program over decades. And really, since the end of its implementation of JCPOA in February 2021, it has done extraordinary experiments in terms of all the things you would need to do to build a bomb. And yeah, you can't bomb knowledge.
And if we've been talking about Fordo and these other...
you can create policies where a secular society will want to have peaceful use of nuclear power and not weaponize it. And this is the problem with Bannon and Alex Jones. They don't get it. You have to overthrow the Ayatollah. You have to destroy the theocratic regime and its projection on its society. You have to destroy its military capability and let that secular, educated society flourish with democracy. That's the answer. But it starts with killing the Ayatollah. Now, blowing up these facilities is going to degrade their capability of enrichment. If you keep the Ayatollah in, then they're going to be able to reconstitute their nuclear program in years. This is the reason why it's a two-pronged approach. It has to be destroying the facilities, and degrade the military capability, which will lead to the overthrow of the Ayatollah. Now, most likely, the Israelis are going to kill the Ayatollah. I think it's just slowly that noose is getting closer and closer and tightening, and eventually he's gonna be killed. So, once you have a secular society where they're governing themselves and not being governed by a theocratic regime, then you're not going to need to weaponize and continue on with the weaponization of this enrichment of uranium. That's the issue. So you can have people that know how to do it floating around. Most of the people that know how to do it are part of the secular society. They're being forced to do it by the theocratic regime using the military apparatus to control the society. But if you eliminate the Ayatollah, then you no longer have that pressure to go for weaponization. This is the reason why Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon and Tucker Carlson and all the other pontificators out there in the MAGA movement is wrong. It's just wrong. The Ayatollah has to be eliminated. And not only that, it was stated 2,000 years ago this was how it's going to play out.
For months and months and months, if not years, surely they would have taken the key materials they need from those sites well before these strikes.
It's an interesting question. So in Isfahan, there is a storage facility where they've been keeping the highest enriched uranium that they have, the 60%. Did they move it? We don't know right now, but we certainly saw vehicles outside of Fordo yesterday. They could have moved it. We also know that just outside of Natanz, they're building a new mountain complex.
Okay, so let's say
Is
they
there another-
moved it. Why would you want to have peaceful negotiations with the Ayatollah? Because the Ayatollah would say, yeah, you can have all the enrichment that are out of these facilities now. Wink, wink, we have another facility you don't know about. This is what General Keane said on Fox News 2 days ago. Our military is afraid that there's actually another facility that they don't know about. Well, that's all the reason to overthrow the Ayatollah. Because a secular society isn't going to weaponize their enrichment.
Which we don't know about. How many centrifuges have they stored in locations all over Iran? We just don't know. So there could be several hundred kilograms of 60% enriched uranium somewhere in Iran. The place where they would turn that into metal to turn it into a bomb is gone, but can they build another one? Sure. So if they're going to take the long approach and be patient, then they can reconstitute a lot of this. But
this is the reason why. This is the reason why I am glad that Trump bombed those facilities and it was successful. I am proud of my president, but he's only halfway. Don't chicken out. Don't be Trump always chickens out. Kill the Ayatollah. Now, the way I think it's going to happen, based on my interpretation of the Zohar, is that Israel will kill the Ayatollah. I don't care who kills him. But the thing is, the Ayatollah has to be eliminated. And then you stop the actual need for the enrichment. And you just let the society blossom. Let the secular society blossom into democracy. Trump needs
Every production line is powered by Trolls.
If Trump creates this environment where there's a negotiation, the Ayatollah's still around, then he's just kicking the can down the road and we'll never have another president. Either he's going to have to eliminate the Ayatollah later in his presidency, or God forbid, he leaves the presidency in 2028 and, we'll never have another president like Trump again because all the other presidents were afraid. So I have to assume that future presidents are going to be afraid. God broke the mold on President Trump. There isn't going to be another President Trump, ever. This is the time to fix the fucking problem in Iran. Don't be afraid. Kill the Ayatollah.
TaskRabbit. I think the U.S. has to negotiate an incredibly intrusive agreement with Iran to monitor and to make sure that they don't have a catholic bomb. But as we both know, that's such an emotional issue for Iran. It's such a core issue for their identity. I don't know what they're going to do.
Why do we keep on thinking that the Ayatollah should be in power? When you have the thought of their religion is that you have to set the whole world on fire so you can usher in the 12th Imam. Yeah, that sounds like a peaceful religion. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and don't be a Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones. Stop eating fried chicken, or you're going to turn into an Alex Jones. And make sure you go to my store and get the turmeric. And this turmeric is going to bring down inflammation, super important for your immune system. It's going to soak up free radicals. By soaking up free radicals and bringing down inflammation, that's going to help your vascular system. Super important. Like I said, in 5 years, you're going to know a lot of people that have brain problems, and bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level is going to be super important. Super important. Pay attention. No one's as accurate as I am. Trust me. Ashwagandha root brings down cortisol levels and helps with your blood glucose levels. That helps with your immune system and your vascular system. And lignans. It's an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. It helps with your endocrine system and it helps with your immune system. It brings down inflammation. Super important. When you stack these together, guess what? You're helping with your brain function. You're helping with your cardiovascular health. And you're helping with your immune system. Don't be an Alex Jones. Because as you start to develop that Swiss cheese brain, you start saying stupid shit like, don't overthrow the Ayatollah. and that if you go into Iran, it's going to be Armageddon. Really? I don't know. It's June 22nd at 12:17 New York time. I look outside, I look around, I don't see Armageddon.
To negotiate, or what happens next?
Oh, well, we've heard Archie this morning saying we were in negotiation, we were talking, and then Iran, and then Israel, and then following that, the U.S. decided to basically kill any talks for any chance for diplomacy. The way the Iranians see it, and the way they insist on communicating it this morning as well. This was a nuclear plan for peace purposes, and any other assumption for them is inaccurate and unjustified. Let's not just. Of course, this is somewhat of a very this is not a very maybe honest depiction of the Iranian nuclear plan. We do know, for example, for a fact, the IAEA has said just last week on Thursday that they believe, first of all, that Iran was not in compliance with with the terms of the NPT.
Well, wait a minute. If they're not compliant and they have 60% enrichment and 83% enrichment, and they have a whole lot of it, and the only reason why they would have a whole lot of it is if they wanted to make a bomb, don't you think that we should bomb them? Maybe we should degrade their capability. Maybe we should overthrow the regime. But if you listen to Alex Jones and Stephen Bannon, they're America first. They're America first. Be a pacifist. Wait until they have a bomb. And just imagine that the change of the hegemonic power of the United States in the region. Just imagine if Iran had a bomb. It would automatically set in motion an arms race between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Shiite and Sunni. And you think that's going to end up well? I don't think so. So that's America First pacifist policy brought to you by Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones. And you have half of the MAGA movement out there that believes they're horse shit.
The treaty that it's a part of, and it's also assumed that it has at least 400 kilograms of enriched uranium of the levels of at least 60%, which is what you need to easily break into a bomb within 2 weeks. So there's somewhat of Archie's stand there is somewhat of a, I would say, dishonesty. But the way the Iranians see it, what do they have to gain now from negotiations? I mean, they have tried to give what they can. You have to remember also they gave a chance to JCPOA, which we know was not very easy to convince the Supreme Leader Khamenei to join. But then when Trump just in his first presidency, he came in and he immediately tossed that out of the window, and that made Iran realize, okay, then maybe we cannot trust the West. They don't have any signals that indicate to them they cannot trust the West, and they also, the way they see it, and Archie also mentioned it again today in his speech, Israel and the U.S. are both nuclear powers who are trying to dictate to Iran if it has or doesn't have the right to have nuclear, and they feel like, well, sorry, people, but you don't have the standing to say this is duplicity.
No. This is where that whole Westphalian logic starts to collapse. You can't use this logical statement that just because the United States have nuclear weapons and Israel has nuclear weapons, therefore Iran must have nuclear weapons. You got to go back to the Bible. You got to go back to the Old Testament, and you got to take a real hard look at what happened when the blessing was going to happen with Jacob and Esau, with their father, Isaac. Okay? Isaac was blind, and he was going to bless the sons at different times and bless them differently. The mother knew that Esau was an animal and was going to, if that blessing went to Esau, that there would be destruction, because he came from a part of the Sephirah where it was about judgment. It was very judgmental. Well, Jacob was more about mercy. Now, who do you think should be the family lineage when it comes to building the temple that allows for the energy flow to come down and bless the world, do you think that the priest, the priestly class, should come from an animal, or do you think it should come from mercy? Because if it comes from judgment, then that power would end up being destructive. That's coming down, that cod flow that's coming down above the ark. But because it was given to Jacob, even though there was some covert things going on to get the blessing went to someone that had mercy and not judgmental. And therefore, the cod flow that went over the ark lead to energy that was beneficial for the world, not destructive. Now, how can I explain this similar concept to what's going on with what's happening right now, contemporarily? Esau, especially negative Esau, is Iran. All right, in broad brushstrokes here. Israel is Jacob. The power of the Kav that was flowing above the ark and that transmitted into the Holy of Holies with the temple, all right, is similar. Not exact, but it's similar to the analogy of nuclear weapons. If you have nuclear power and you have a mercy soul root, you're going to be using it for positive purposes. But if you have a judgmental or animalistic soul root, like Esau, you're going to use it for destruction. The mother knew this. And that's why she convinced Jacob to pretend he was Esau to get the blessing, to prevent world destruction. And we're seeing this playing out in a similar theme right now. And that is why the US should have nuclear weapons, Israel should have nuclear weapons, and why Iran's theocratic regime cannot have nuclear weapons. Because the mother of the twins, Jacob and Esau, knew that this was going to fucking happen.
I mean, we've had that through the negotiations. The gap between the two sides is just so immense that it's hard to see how it's being bridged so easily.
Talking about a picture of what's actually going on as far as Iran's nuclear program goes, the inspectors who do get in and do get to have a look are pretty much restricted to the areas they can go to. Is that right? So we're not getting a clear picture. We don't know where Iran stands. And at the same time, does that mean the US and Israel also are unclear as to exactly what Iran's capabilities are?
So Iran has been under very intense monitoring, not just through the IAEA, but also through spycraft for decades. We've been looking at them so closely to see what's happening. And we do know, as I mentioned, they're building new facilities. There are attempts underway to try to create more bunkers, more tunnels, more places where they can hide.
And what was part of the personality of Esau? He was a hunter. He schemed. He was animalistic. He wanted to kill. These seem a lot like the Ayatollah, all right? And the proxies that they feed.
And we know so much about the Fordo facility, for instance, because Iran had to, in order to be compliant with their NPT obligations, with the comprehensive safeguards agreement with the IAEA, they had to give the plans for the facility to the IAEA. The inspectors know what they're looking at. And so we also know what's in there that they've told us about, but we don't know what they have not told us about. And again, they've learned so many lessons from all of this, all of these attacks, from the IAEA inspections. So they may have learned a tremendous amount about how to hide things better next time. So again, that's why I think we're going to need a very intrusive agreement, which will be very hard to negotiate. But
Just a little point there. Fordo was not, the information of the existence of Fordo was not willingly disclosed by the Iranians. It was forced on them because actually some agencies, intelligence agencies, have given this information to actually dissident Iranians outside of Iran who have brought this to the air. So I think when you talk about what we do know, I think we also need to keep in mind what we've seen in the last 9 days is that Israeli intelligence infiltration into Iran, into the fact that the Mossad claims to have established its own bases on Iranian soil is quite high. And they also want to give Iran the impression that they're completely vulnerable and completely under Israeli eye. You can see that also with Israel's success in eliminating both of Iran's chief military officers, one after another, even though the second one was trying to very much escape that. So it can be that we know much, definitely that Israel knows much more than we think they know. And I think the next 48 hours, we will also see how it determines, the actions of the players in this.
One last word, William, really briefly. If you say Iran would be forced into an intrusive agreement if any negotiations were fruitful, can we say that they're acting seriously, taking these negotiations or have taken these negotiations seriously?
It's the wrong question.
It's so hard to
It's
say.
it's the wrong question. The right question is, should the Ayatollah be given existence or not? And my answer to that is no. He needs to die.
And one of their chief negotiating tactics is delay. And so that's one of the things that got them in trouble here. They had talks with the EU, for instance, and the US just completely lost patience with that because, we'll get back to you in a few weeks or something like that. It's just not acceptable for Trump, for the United States, or for Israel. So it's really hard to say whether or not they're going to take this very seriously. They should.
William, thank you very much for your analysis. Shani, as well, we will be following these developments for you.
More Westphalian bullshit. And we've had it ever since October 7th, 2023. All right, let's go to Fox News. They're talking about Rubio. I think Rubio said the game is up. So let's just listen in here. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the D3. This will help with gene expression, help to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis. D3 is super important for bone density and helping with cardiovascular health. Stack it with K2. If you take calcium and take the D3 and the K2 and do resistance training, you're going to increase your bone density. Super important when you get older. You don't want to fall when you're 65 years old or 70, break your hip, and then die 3 weeks later. Believe me, there are a lot of people that happens to. So, you know what? Get better bone density. Now, in addition, taking D3 and K2 is going to help to pull some of that calcium around plaque formation and prevent further calcium depositing from forming. So that's going to help with your cardiovascular health. I bet Alex Jones doesn't know that. Resveratrol. I've been taking resveratrol for decades. Do you want to look like DrPaulCottrell or do you want to look like Alex Jones? I bet he doesn't take resveratrol for decades. And resveratrol soaks up free radicals, so that's going to be super helpful in reducing stress in your cell. It also helps the health of the mitochondria, so you're going to have more energy. And it helps with youthful gene expression and gets rid of cells that are in senescence. So you're getting rid of cells that have been collecting garbage, and you're getting a better gene expression profile that's younger, preventing that methylation through aging. So take the resveratrol, stacks really well with C60, NAD+, ubiquinol, clarity factor. And let's talk about clarity factor. Clarity factor will help to get rid of that brain fog. And believe me, Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones has a lot of brain fog. Now, by taking clarity factor, drink it with filtered water, and it'll allow you to concentrate on tasks at work or at home, and it'll help with that positive neuroplasticity and improve those dendritic connections so you're thinking quicker and you have better memory. Take clarity factor, again, stack it with C60, NAD+, resveratrol, ubiquinol. This is a great supplement. Make sure you take it. And like I said, in 5 years, you're going to see an awful lot of people tremoring, having gait issues, having memory issues, thinking in very disruptive manner. You're starting to see it already with people that are in their 40s and early 50s. They go, There's nothing wrong with once in a while that happening, but when they're doing it all the time, guess what? That's there's a neurological problem. You're going to see a lot of people having this in 5 years. Better pay attention. And once again, DrPaulCottrell's right. Alex Jones is wrong.
A breaking news and historic day for the United States, Israel, and the world. The U.S. bombs Iran. The Commander-in-Chief, President Donald Trump, authorizing the U.S. military to strike 3 of Iran's most lethal nuclear sites last night. We know of no human casualties, but Iran's nuclear infrastructure appears to be
Why do we have to have a
damaged.
soundtrack
The
to
biggest
this?
B-2 stealth bomber action we have ever seen, including obliterating Iran's most significant uranium enrichment.
Why do they have to have a soundtrack to this?
Last night.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
Joining me now in his first interview since the U.S. action is the Secretary.
If Stephen Bannon and Alex Jones got their way before this attack, Fordo and the other 2 nuclear facilities would still be around. They didn't want to do this because they're pacifists. Pacifists are not leaders. We need leaders. But they play to a base and make a lot of money doing it through their ad revenue. And there's just a big part of society that is afraid to be a leader, afraid to actually get the job done. And it's easier to be a pacifist. But that's America First policy. Really? Really? America First policy is this. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. You take risks. You lead. You don't run away and hide under your bed. And Stephen Bannon still can't understand what really happened in 2020. It's not the CCP virus. It's the USA CCP virus. 100% fact on that. But he still can't get that. If he can't get that right, how the hell is he right about Iran? Because what it is he's afraid. He's afraid.
State of America, Secretary Marco Rubio. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Are we now at war with Iran?
No, we're not. This is not a war against Iran. This is very simple. 67 days ago, the President of the United States sent the Iranians a letter and it said, you're not going to have nuclear weapons. You're not going to have a militarized nuclear program. Let's negotiate. I want to do this diplomatically. I want to do this peacefully. They tried to play him along the way they've played every American president for the last 35 years. And, the president told them, if we don't get a deal, which is what we wanted, then I'll have to handle it differently. And that's what he did last night. He handled it differently. But that was an Iranian choice. We didn't make that choice. They did. By playing games with Donald Trump, they made a huge mistake. And President Trump acted last night. And I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done. They got to do what they got to do for their own public relations purposes. But the only people in the world that are unhappy about what happened in Iran last night is the regime in Iran.
Have you heard from anyone in Iran, and are you expecting retaliation?
Well, if they retaliate, it'll be the worst mistake they've ever made. Look, we can fly in and out of Iran at will. We went in last night. The president sent their military forces from halfway across the world, went in, conducted this operation, left. Not a shot was fired against us. They didn't even know what had happened. By the time we left, the planes were out of their airspace before they finally started realizing they'd been hit. So it would be a terrible mistake if Iran retaliates. But that's not our goal. We are not declaring war on Iran. We're not looking for war in Iran. But if they attack us, then I think we have capabilities they haven't even seen yet. It would be a terrible mistake on their part. And frankly, it's not what we hope for or wish. What we want now is to ensure that Iran never has nuclear weapons. And what they want is a civil nuclear program where they have power plants like a lot of other countries in the world have. They can do that. That's the deal that's been offered to them. They rejected it. They played us. They tried to play us, I should say. They wouldn't respond to our offers. They
And that's the
disappeared for
thing.
10
This
days.
is what I'm talking about with Esau. He's a killer. He's a schemer. He goes and judges things in a negative light. He's judgmental. He's not merciful. And Stephen Bannon thinks that it's okay to allow this crap to happen. And then he's saying that he's a religious person, you know, under the Christian faith. Really? 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 Because true Christians are aligned with Jacob, not negative Esau.
And now, you know, the president had to take action as a response.
And the response included strategic ambiguity. Can you walk us through the plan in terms of how it was deceptive, not allowing the Iranians to understand what was really taking place?
Well, ultimately, when we do these things, it's because we care about the safety and security of our troops, of our airmen, and all those who are supporting these missions. So, you know, obviously, the element of surprise is important in military tactics. In this particular, now, I don't think the Iranians or anyone else should have been under any mystery. The president said very clearly, we have 60 days to make progress on a deal, and if we don't, I'm going to deal with it differently. But in terms of what people call deception and surprise and things of this nature, the core of that is not the success. The mission was going to be successful no matter what. The core of that was protecting our servicemen and women who are in harm's way and conducting that mission. That's the most important part. And they went in, they did what they needed to do with precision and skill that no other military in the world can do, and they left. And they were well outside of Iranian airspace before the regime even realized what had happened. And that was the goal here, and that was achieved. You know, these planes came from halfway across the world, and no one saw them coming. And that's a huge credit to Pete Hegseth and General Kane and General Kurilla, and obviously our commander-in-chief for pulling that off.
Well, the president said in a post recently that he knows where the supreme leader is hiding, but that he was not ready to take him out yet. What can you tell us about your expectations with regard to regime change in Iran?
Well, that's certainly not the goal of what we're working on here. The goal is stated very clearly in a letter the president sent the supreme leader about 65, 67 days ago. And in a letter, he said, you're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Let's negotiate peacefully a solution. We can make a really good deal that's good for Iran, good for America, good for the world. If you don't, however, then I'm going to have to deal with this differently. The Iranians didn't like the letter. They didn't respond to it. They ultimately entered into fake negotiations and tried to play them along. In essence, they thought they could do with President Trump what they've done with presidents in the past and get away with it. And they found out last night that they can't. And the world found out last night that you can't. And that's important, not just on this issue, but for so many other issues happening around the world. I think that what we are seeing is that this is a president that tells you what he's going to do, and then he does it. And I think that to a lot of people, including the Iranian regime, is shocking.
What are your expectations in terms of Iran's nuclear capabilities today?
Well, they're certainly degraded. Look, at the end of the day, if Iran is committed to becoming a nuclear weapons power, I do think it puts the regime at risk. I really do. I think it would be the end of the regime if they tried to do that. It's certainly been set back from a technical standpoint, not just due to what we did last night, but obviously the Israelis have done incredible work in advance as well. But ultimately, they have to make a decision. It's a very simple decision. If what they want is nuclear reactors so they can have electricity, there are so many other countries in the world that do that. And they don't have to enrich their own uranium. They can do that. But if what they want is a secret program buried in the mountain where no one can see it and inspectors can only come when they say they can come, if that's what they want, then they're going to have big problems because this is a dangerous, violent, radical regime. Not the Iranian people. We have no problem. We didn't hit Iranian people last night. We hit nuclear facilities. And if what they want is some secret program that looks nothing like the civil nuclear programs around the world, it looks a lot like you're trying to build a bomb, they're going to continue to have problems, not just with us, but with many other countries in the world.
Problems like what? What do you mean?
Like the problems they're facing right now. Listen, why do we have bases in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar and UAE? All of those bases are there to help protect those countries from Iran. Why did Hezbollah exist? Because of Iran. What does Hamas exist? Because of Iran. How do the Houthis exist? Because of Iran. Who built the IEDs that maimed and killed American soldiers in Iraq? Iran. They're behind every problem in this region. They are the sole source of instability in the entire Middle East, and the world's been paying a price for this for 40-something years. Imagine those people having a nuclear weapon, just one.
And the thing is, to prove my point, the reason why they're doing this is that there's a battle between Shia and Sunni and Shia and Sunni and Israel and the Jewish people. This is a biblical issue here. It's not just Iran. Iran is the country that's housing the soul root that's being fed into the Ayatollah that's negative Esau. And if they had a nuclear weapon, look at what they're doing with just conventional means. Just imagine what they would do with a nuclear weapon. And Steve and Bannon keeps on telling you, America first, stay out, be a pacifist. Really. For a former Navy guy, Stephen Bannon used to be a navigator, or I think on a destroyer. I would think that he would be a little bit more America first, be a leader, take risks, move forward, be a hawk, don't be a pacifist. But he is a pacifist. My grandfather was in the Navy during World War II. He was a CB, and a CB during World War II blew up stuff, built stuff, and killed. So there wasn't anything he couldn't kill, couldn't blow up, and couldn't build, all right? He could do it all. He was like Popeye, all right? That's how they trained the CBs in World War II. And if my grandfather was still alive and he saw Bannon, he would beat the shit out of Bannon. He would tear off his head and shit down his throat.
Ability to being on the threshold of having a nuclear weapon. That's what the world was facing. That is unacceptable. President Trump did the world a favor last night, and now Iran should sort of wake up, the Iranian regime should wake up and say, okay, if we really want nuclear energy in our country, there's a way to do it. That offer's still there. We're prepared to talk to them tomorrow and start working on that. Steve Witkoff has traveled extensively around the world trying to reach that deal with them, but they play too many games. They play way too many games, and now they found out.
The president has said many times no nuclear weapons, but the ultimate goal also happens to be no biological weapons, chemicals, no drones, no proxy warfare. Do you believe that the Iranians will follow that and you'll achieve the ultimate goal of success here, long term?
Well, I don't know what they're going to decide to do next. If they're being rational, I think they realize, if what they want is a country that has a nuclear energy program, they can have that. I mean, many countries around the world. I don't like the regime, but we're not into the regime change business here. We're into the safety and security of the United States business. So that's a choice they'll have to make. I hope they're being rational in their decision making. But I think the most important thing I hope they realize is the game is up. Okay, they have played the world for 40-something years with these nuclear talks and this, delaying things. They got a crazy deal out of John Kerry when he was Secretary of State under the Obama administration, where they got billions of dollars. And by the way, agreed to something that allowed them to continue to build their missile capacity and sponsor terrorism. They've been playing the world for 40-something years. They're not going to play President Trump. And they found out last night that when he says he's going to do something, he'll do it. And he doesn't want to do it. It's not his first choice. But it's the only choice. That's the only choice the Iranian regime left us, because they play too many games. They use diplomacy to hide behind and obfuscate and think they can buy themselves time. They think they're cute. They're not cute. And they're not going to get away with this stuff. Not under President Trump.
The Europeans have been feckless pretty much throughout this conflict in the last several weeks. What are your expectations for our partners and allies in Europe?
Well, look, I think the Europeans, particularly the Germans, the French, and the Brits, have made very clear that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. In fact, I think the French, for the first time, have kind of leaned forward even more and said they can't even have an enrichment capability. There are existing sanctions under the old JCPOA that we're no longer a part of, but they remain a part of. Iran is in complete violation Okay, and so those three countries have to make a decision by no later than October of this year whether to put sanctions back on Iran, snap them back. And we encourage them to continue to press them on that front because that's another set of pressure. So, obviously, these are allies and partners we work with closely on a bunch of issues around the world. And I think they have in their hands a very powerful piece of leverage on the Iranian regime, which is the snapback provisions under the previous JCPOA. And I think so far they've been very tough and strong on that. And we encourage them to continue to do so and to continue to tell the Iranian regime. I keep saying Iranian regime because it's not the people we're quarrel with. The Iranian regime, they consistently message them, and we're grateful for it, that the solution to this problem is negotiate directly with the Americans. That's another thing. They don't even talk to us directly. We always have to have a middleman. They want to pass messages and notes like we're in third grade. We're not doing that anymore. Direct negotiations. Let's talk about how we peacefully resolve this problem. The Europeans have pressured them on that point, and we encourage them to continue to do so, and are grateful that they've been doing that so far.
What about our allies in the Middle East right now? Interesting to note that we have not heard from any of the proxies of Iran. No comment from the Iranians so far. No comment from Hezbollah or the Houthis. What are your reactions there, as well as our allies in the Middle East? President Trump, of course, using his first trip internationally to go and strengthen relations with our friends in the Middle East.
Well, we made clear that any of these proxies attack America, we're not only going to deal with the proxies, but we're also going to pin it on Iran. We know who's behind these. That's another thing they do. They create these little groups like the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, and then they hide behind them and pretend it's not them. We know it's them, including the Houthis, by the way. So Iran will be held responsible for the actions of these groups. In terms of the other countries in the region, look, I think that we've worked very cooperatively with them. The president just had a great visit to Saudi Arabia, to the UAE, and to Qatar. Very productive. But I just asked him and remind everybody, the only reason we have U.S. bases in the region, the only reason we have an air base in Qatar, an air base in UAE, and an air base in Saudi Arabia is because they are afraid that Iran will attack them. And they want us there to help defend them. And so, if Iran wasn't a threat, we wouldn't need those bases there. So these countries fully recognize the threat that Iran poses. That's why they want us there to help defend their oil fields and their infrastructure, or help them defend themselves. And if the Iranian regime was no longer a threat, we wouldn't need to have any of these bases in the region. We wouldn't need to have any American service people in the region. But that's the state of affairs right now. So these countries understand what Iran is and what the regime is, and they get it. They understand it.
How long have these plans been in place to take out the nuclear facilities?
Well, the president makes the ultimate decision, and look, he in terms of plans, I mean, we have all sorts of contingency plans for all sorts of possible strikes all over the world. Once the president says, "Okay, work up options for me," they obviously go back and refine those. And then there are multiple points along the way in which the president has decisions to make about go or no go. And it really comes right up to 10 minutes before the bombs are actually dropped. So the president retains as commander-in-chief full control of these operations. But we have incredibly capable military people in our country. The operation yesterday was extraordinary, really extraordinary. Obviously, there are elements of it that will not ever be publicly shared. But suffice it to say that there is no country in the world that can do what the United States did last night through our incredible military led by our commander-in-chief. And I think a lot of credit goes out to Pete Hegseth, our defense secretary, did a phenomenal job of managing this process. And obviously, all the way down to the airmen and others who conducted this operation. It was flawless. It was perfect. It was executed with extraordinary skill. And I think demonstrates the capabilities we have, which no other country in the world has anything remotely close to this.
Secretary, what does the road ahead look like from a military standpoint in the U.S. regarding Iran over the near term?
Well, we've achieved our objective. Our objective was to severely degrade and or destroy 3 nuclear sites inside of Iran. One of them had 60% enriched uranium. 60%. Remember, you only need like 3.67% for a nuclear power plant. You only need 20% enriched, very small quantities for like medical isotopes and that kind of thing. The only countries in the world that have anything close to 60% enriched uranium are countries that have nuclear weapons. They have stored 60% enriched uranium in one facility there called Esfahan. They were threatening to create even more of it. And then they had all these centrifuges that were capable of enriching up to weapons grade at 90%, buried in mountains, I know, but it's all for peaceful purposes. Give me a break. Everybody gets it. Unfortunately, they've been able to get away with that game for a long time. Those were the objectives last night. We hit 3 nuclear-related sites controlled by the Iranian regime. And now what happens next will depend on what Iran does next and the regime does next. If they attack us, it would be a terrible mistake on their part. There are they are completely vulnerable. They don't control their own airspace. They can't protect their own airspace. They can't even protect their own leaders. So I think it would be a big mistake if they did anything against us. But look, they'll have to make that decision, and the president will respond accordingly and decisively. But no one, after last night, should be under any illusions. When Donald Trump says he's going to do something, when the president says this president says he's going to do something, he's not just wasting words. He means it.
So was it fair to say they were 1 week away from having a nuclear weapon? And is that all destroyed at this point? Is that gone?
I think it's fair to say they have everything you need to make a nuclear weapon. Everything. They have the enrichment capability. They have highly enriched uranium in sufficient quantities to make at least 9 or 10 bombs. All they have to do is spend a couple days enriching it from 60 to 90%. We're certain they have a weapons design. They have mid-range missiles. They have short-range missiles that they can put warheads on. And by the way, they claim to have a space program. It's not a space program. Iran's not going to the moon. They have a space program because they're trying to develop ICBMs, long-range rockets that could one day reach the United States the way North Korea can already reach the United States with their ICBMs. That's what they're working on. They have all the pieces in place to have a nuclear weapon. All that's missing is flipping the switch. But in terms of all you things you need, all the structures, all the science, all of that, they had it all in place. Now, not so much. And that's why we did the world a great favor. Or we would all wake up one day in less than a decade in a world where radical Shia clerics control nuclear weapons capable of reaching not just the Middle East, but all of Europe and potentially the east coast of the United States. That is an unacceptable risk. There's no way we were leaving that for future generations.
Secretary, final question here. Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I would encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that. But other countries should be looking at that as well. It would hurt other countries' economies a lot worse than ours. It would be, I think, a massive escalation that would merit a response, not just by us, but from others. So, look, they're gonna say what they need to say. These are the things that need to happen for their own internal politics and so forth. But in the end, we're going to judge them by the actions that they take moving forward. We had 3 objectives. We struck those 3 objectives with decisive force. And that was the point of this mission. And that's what we achieved. What happens next will depend on what they do. They want to negotiate. We're ready to negotiate. They want to get cute and do things that are dangerous. We have responses available that are devastating.
Secretary, was China complicit? We know that jets flew into Iran. We don't know what were on those jets.
No, we don't have any evidence that the Chinese were involved in anything other than perhaps trying to get Chinese nationals out of Iran.
Okay. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm Steve Ducey.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients, has a very comprehensive compound profile. Read the label on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Boomer Boost will target multiple systems. It will target your brain function. It will help with your heart and your vascular system. It's going to help boost up your metabolism and your energy levels. It'll help with musculature. Super important to take every day. Take 1 scoop, mix it with soft foods, filtered water or milk, or even a smoothie. Take it once a day, either for breakfast or for lunch. You'll lose weight. You'll have a steady energy level throughout the whole day. It will reduce that brain fog, allow you to think clearly. You'll sleep better. You'll be thinking quicker. Your memory will improve. And by taking this every day, you're going to be losing weight too, safely. And by doing exercising, the 4 different modalities of exercising, cardio, resistance training, stretching, and balancing, you're going to gain musculature. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. And it's very important, no matter what the season is, to get drops and lozenges. So get the elderberry and zinc lozenges that I have, structural nanosilver. And you get 21 in each bag for the elderberry and zinc lozenges. Get a few bags for your household. And I also have 3 different flavors for the drops. You get 100 in each bag. The drops are smaller than the lozenges. You can get it in cherry, in honey and lemon, and also in blueberry. All right, very high quality. You never know when you need them. Right when you have that irritation in your throat, take them right away to mitigate the problem. Super important to take them right away. So you need them available at home, at work. So please go to my store, get a few bags for your household, and be prepared. Okay, let's go to Simca Sessions. He's going to explain. He calls it Iran 101. All right.
Introducing business essentials from U.S. Bank with no monthly maintenance fee checking and card payment processing. With hotels and vacation rentals, Booking.com has something for everyone. Jesus! You got anything more boutique? Oui, right this way.
In the news, the whole world is watching. Iran and Israel are fighting. What is it about? Most people have no clue. But how can you figure it out? How can you figure the game out if you don't even understand the players? So this is going to be Iran 101.
Simca Sessions, out-of-the-box insights into history, religion, and politics.
Iran is ancient Persia. So all those people say they're a very old culture. You bet they are. 4,000 years. But they're not Arabs. They're Persians. Right? Persia. Even today, Iranians call themselves Persians. They speak Farsi, the language of the Persians. And for thousands of years, their religion was Zoroastrianism, a kind of fire religion, monotheism, very interesting, totally persecuted today Zoroastrians by the Iranian regime, and they flee to places like America. Now, in ancient days, that Iran, Persia, was either the best of friend of Israel or the worst of enemy. Like in modern times, under the Shah, best of friends, under the Ayatollahs, worst enemies. In fact, the great Iranian king, Cyrus I, is the only non-Israelite, non-Jew, who is called in the Hebrew Bible a Messiah, an anointed one. In the book of Isaiah 45:1, why would the Jewish Bible call a Persian a Messiah? Because he passed an edict allowing the Jews that had been exiled into Babylon by the evil Babylonian kingdom to go back to Zion, back to Jerusalem. What? Yeah, the original Zionism, one can say, was a Persian invention of Cyrus. He said Jews belong in Judea. Jerusalem is their capital, and I, Cyrus, the Persian emperor, will facilitate this. Amazing. Unlike today's people say they don't belong here, we should do them. Cyrus said they belong in Israel, and I'll help them. But there are evil moments in Jewish-Persian relationship. For example, Purim story. The Purim story, people know, kind of Jewish Halloween, everybody gets dressed up, puts on masks, plays games. But what does it celebrate? It's celebrating a near genocide. There was a king in Persia, Ahasuerus. Scholars think that he's Xerxes, you know, the guy from 300, if you've seen the film. In that movie, he gets his butt beat by the Greeks. But in any case, there's this king, and he's kind of a muddlehead, and he has this real hot, beautiful, she won a beauty contest in the story, wife, Esther. He doesn't know that she's a Jew. But he also has an advisor, evil, and that guy's name is Haman. Sure sounds like Khamenei, the leader in Iran at this very moment. And this Haman has a brilliant new idea. Let's destroy all the Jews, every last baby. Let's perpetrate a genocide, a Holocaust against them. Let's kill them all. And then the king says, good idea. And that's when his beautiful wife Esther comes out of the closet and says, "Dearie Pooh, I'm a Jew. Do you want to kill me?" "Oh no," says the king. And then he turns around, he's a muddlehead. Anyway, now he's on the side of the Jews, and he hangs Haman, and the Jews are saved, and the Persians become the best friends of the Jewish people. And so it goes. Sometimes terrible enemies, sometimes great friends. And then the Muslims conquer Persia, convert the Zoroastrians, most of them, not all of them, to Islam. But here's the interesting thing. After Muhammad dies, shortly thereafter, most Muslims, 90% go that way with succession, but the Iranians go that way. What do I mean? They follow Ali, the son-in-law and cousin of Muhammad. And when the other guys, the other Muslims, murder Ali's son Hussein at a place called Karbala, whoa, split a room. And that split a room lasts to this day. To this day, Sunnis hate Shia. Shia hate Sunnis. Arabs hate Persians. Persians hate Arabs. In modern times, in the 1980s, the Iraqis gotta go to a bomb shelter.
American Dream in Nickelodeon Universe. It's non-stop Nickelodeon fun. With your favorite characters and dozens of awesome rides, the slime of your life is just minutes from Manhattan at American Dream.
You know, it's amazing. It's amazing, you know, how safe the United States is, and, you know, how blessed we are, and we don't realize how safe we are. And we have a frivolous lifestyle. And meanwhile, Simca is trying to do a recording, and he's in Israel, and he's getting bombed during the recording.
They fired a bunch of missiles at me, my family, the rest of the country, at our house, at our dogs, ballistic missiles. Nobody would put up with this. But let's continue. From 1980 to 1988, there's a war in the Middle East, not with Israel. It's Iraq versus Iran, the Sunnis versus the Shiite, the Arab versus the Persians. What is it about? They just hate each other. They fight a war for 8 years, not 1 inch of ground that goes this way or that way. But 1 million people die. I don't remember any demonstrations, any PC people, you know, doing all that virtue signaling to save the 1 million people. Nobody was on the campus of Columbia and Harvard going, "Stop the war now." No, nobody. 1 million people. In fact, the Iraqis created minefields. The Iranians didn't have ways to identify and clear the mines. So they came up with a brilliant idea of using their own children to walk across minefields and clear them by dying and exploding. But not to think that they're bad people. They gave them little plastic keys that they hung around their neck, and these were keys to heaven. And tens of thousands of Iranian children walked and died on these minefields. This is what the Iranian regime, the Shia regime, the Ayatollahs, this is what they do to their children. Can you imagine what they would do to anyone else's children? This is what they did when they were fighting Muslims. Can you imagine what they would do if they ever fought Christians or Jews? So in 1978, these Shiite theologians called the Ayatollahs take over Persia, a country with thousands of years of Persian history and culture. They take them over. And they've been ruling a totalitarian state that executes about 1,000 people a year. Where are all the demonstrations? 1,000 people a year. They execute in their prisons, or they hang them in public squares. For what? For being gay? Really? For drug abuse? For not wearing their headscarves properly? This is who's hijacked the Persian history, the Persian people. And what do they do in the rest of the world? They fund every evil group in the world. It doesn't matter to them. Are they communist? Are they Islamic? They don't care. If they kill, they're good. They funded Hezbollah. Hezbollah in Beirut in 1983 murdered 240 plus Marines, American Marines. They have sponsored through proxies. They're very clever. All kinds of murder all over the world. They fund the Houthis who fight the Arab Saudis, the Sunnis. They don't care. They funded Hezbollah to blow up a Jewish community center in South America, in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. Why would they do that? What did those people do to them? Are they colonialists? No, they're doing hands, they're doing, the arts and crafts. They're doing arts and crafts in Buenos Aires, making little menorahs for Hanukkah, and they blew them up. Almost 100 people died, and many more were wounded. This is the people that want to have in their hands nuclear weapons. And the whole world says, the whole civilized world says, they really shouldn't have nuclear weapons. But nobody does frickin' anything, nothing. They give them respect, they negotiate with them. They say, you can do this, but you can't do that. You can kill a little bit, but you can't kill too much. You want to destroy all of Israel? You say repeatedly, maybe only half. Let's meet halfway. Let's make a deal. Well, just like in Esther's time, Israel decided, no. They're only days away. Bibi Netanyahu is supposed to be such a warmonger. He waited far too long, only days away from making nuclear weapons. No, it's not days, it's weeks, it's months. Okay, months away from building nuclear weapons, Israel attacked. The whole world should be helping. The whole world should be standing up, giving a standing ovation to the brave Israelis that are bombing the crap out of this menace to humanity. That hasn't happened yet, totally. What will happen is Khamenei will end up like Haman. And one day in the future, the Jews will have a party, just like Purim, and they will celebrate the day that Khamenei went down, and the modern Iranians couldn't do what old Haman wanted to do a long time. Persia will become great again by getting rid of its ayatollahs.
Yep.
Following the U.S. bombing of 3 nuclear sites in Iran yesterday, Trump administration officials are breathing a sigh of relief that the highly classified bombing mission appears to have gone off without a hitch. But there is also concern now about what happens next when it comes to Iran. Operation Midnight Hammer involved top secret planning and a head fake as 2 strike forces of B-2 bombers departed the U.S., flying in opposite directions late Friday night. On Saturday, defense officials confirmed to CBS News that there were, in fact, B-2s headed to Guam, flying west from their home in Missouri. But those were decoys. A separate fleet of B-2s departed from that same location, heading east to the targets in Iran. Pentagon officials say the mission was an overwhelming success, but also concede it is too early to assess if Iran still has nuclear capability. 14 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator weapons, or MOPs, dropped on an underground nuclear facility in Fordow and a key uranium enrichment site in Natanz. Additional American Tomahawk struck a 3rd site at Isfahan.
I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America and Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future.
At the White House late last night, President Trump issued his own stern warning to Iran.
There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
And those words, go after other targets, have led to confusion and some concern about what is next for the U.S. role in this very volatile crisis. Secretary of State and acting White House National Security Advisor Marco Rubio now joins us. Mr. Secretary, I know it has been an intense few hours, but so far it does not appear that Iran has yet retaliated against the United States. What intelligence do you have at this point about their capabilities to respond, the intent of their proxies? Is there any kind of command and control structure left to activate them?
Yeah, well, we'll see what Iran decides to do. I think they should choose the route of peace. We've done everything. We have bent over backwards, okay, to create a deal with these people. Steve Witkoff has traveled the world extensively, met with them. Well, not even met with them, met through the Omanis with them and discussed back and forth. We even put an offer to them that they wanted elements of it in writing, and we offered it to them. Very generous offer, by the way. We've done it, and we're prepared right now. If they call right now and say, we want to meet, let's talk about this, we're prepared to do that. The president's made that clear from the very beginning. His preference is to deal with this issue diplomatically. But he also told them we had 60 days to make progress or something else was going to happen. And I think they thought they were dealing with a different kind of leader, like the kinds of leaders they've been playing games with for the last 30 or 40 years. And they found out that's not the case. So this mission was a very precise mission. It had 3 objectives, 3 nuclear sites. It was not an attack on Iran. It was not an attack on the Iranian people. This wasn't a regime change move. This was designed to degrade and or destroy 3 nuclear sites related to their nuclear weaponization ambitions. And that was delivered on yesterday. What happens next will now depend on what Iran chooses to do next. If they choose the path of diplomacy, we're ready. We can do a deal that's good for them, the Iranian people, and good for the world. Yeah. If they choose another route, then there'll be consequences for that.
Let me follow up on a phrase you just word, weaponization ambitions. Are you saying there that the United States did not see intelligence that the Supreme Leader had ordered weaponization?
That's irrelevant. I think that question being asked in the media, that's an irrelevant question.
No, that is the key point in U.S. intelligence assessment. You know that.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was.
No, it's not.
Political decision
I know that better than you know that, and I know that that's not the case.
But I'm asking you whether the order was given.
And the people who say that, it doesn't matter if the order was given. They have everything they need to build nuclear weapons. Why would you bury things in a mountain, 300 feet under the ground?
Right.
Why would you bury why do they have 60% enriched uranium? You don't need 60% enriched uranium. The only countries in the world that have uranium at 60% are countries that have nuclear weapons, because they can just quickly make it 90. They have all the elements. They have. Why do they have a space program? Is Iran going to go to the moon? No, they're trying to build an ICBM.
No, but that's a question. That's a question. That's a question of intent. And you know, in the intelligence assessment, that it was that Iran wanted to be a threshold state and use this leverage. I'm talking about the public March assessment, and that's why I was asking you if you know something more from March.
That's also an inaccurate representation of it. That's an accurate representation of it. That's not how intelligence is read. That's not how intelligence is used. Here's what the whole world knows. Now, forget about intelligence. What the IAEA knows. They are enriching uranium well beyond anything you need for a civil nuclear program. So why would you enrich uranium at 60%?
Right.
If you don't intend to one day use it to take it to 90 and build a weapon? Right. Why are you developing ICBMs? Why do you have 8,000 short-range missiles and 2,000 to 3,000 long mid-range missiles that you continue to develop? Why do you do all these things? They have everything they need for a nuclear weapon. They have the delivery mechanisms. They have the enrichment capability. They have the highly enriched uranium that is stored. Yes. That's all we need to see.
Right. Well, and
especially in the hands of a regime that's already involved in terrorism and proxies and all kinds of things around. They are the source of all.
Yes, and no one's disputing. No one's disputing that. I'm not doing that here. And they were censured at the IAEA for that enrichment and for violating their non-proliferation agreements. I was simply asking if you had intelligence that there was an order to weaponize, because you said weaponization ambition.
Well, we have intelligence that they have everything they need to build a nuclear weapon, and that's more than enough.
Okay. I want to ask you on the policy front. There are personnel throughout the Middle East from the United States and Bahrain and Kuwait and other bases. If those countries are attacked by Iran because of their association with the United States, will the United States defend them?
Well, that's exactly why they're there. That's a great point, actually. Do you know why we have bases in Bahrain and Qatar and UAE and all these places? All those bases are there because those countries are afraid that Iran will attack them. If Iran was not a threat to the region, if the Iranian regime, because I'm talking about the Iranian people, the regime was not a threat to the region, we wouldn't have to have any of these bases. Those bases are there because those countries are petrified that that the Iranian Shia clerics that run that country will attack their country.
Will the United
As you
States
know, they've
defend
got
them
a
if they
very
are?
difficult history. Well, that's why we're there. That's why we're there.
So,
But
yes,
they'll
we
attack
will
us,
defend
is
them.
what they're threatening to do. So we'll defend our people, obviously. We'll defend our people. Well, they'll attack our bases. And those are our bases, and we're going to defend our personnel. We're prepared to do that. But we'll do more than just defend. We'll impose costs on Iran if they attack American personnel, whether they do it directly or whether they do it through some of these proxies that they try to hide behind. And that includes the Houthis.
Yes.
So another proxy of theirs. So, but let's hope they don't choose that route. Let's all hope that they actually decide, okay, let's go negotiate because we want a diplomatic and peaceful solution. We have achieved our objectives. We're ready to negotiate this in a peaceful, diplomatic way. We've been prepared to do that for days. They are the ones that played games, as they have done for 40 years, as they have done to multiple presidents. They tried to play games with President Trump, and they see what happens. This is not a game-playing president. When he says he's going to do something, he will do it.
I hear you saying here you want to de-escalate when you are talking about diplomacy. You are looking for Iran to pick up that offer that was put on the table you mentioned by Steve Witkoff. Can you just clarify, does that mean the U.S. would still allow for Iran to have a civilian nuclear program if it does not enrich on its own soil?
But that's never been an issue. There's countries all over the world that have a civil
But
nuclear
that's still
program.
the
No
offer
one
on
here
the
is saying
table?
that Iran can't. Sure, that's always been there. Any country in the world has a right to have a civil nuclear program. What they don't have a right to do is to enrich it at 60%, hide it under a mountain, and develop long-range and short-range and mid-range missiles and sponsor terrorist proxies all over the world. They don't have a right to do that. And that's what they've been doing. And no one's dealt with it. And it's continued to linger. And they've played games with multiple presidents and multiple countries around the world, and they've gotten away with it for 40-something years. This is very simple. The president wants to resolve this diplomatically and peacefully. He gave them a chance to do that. They delayed. They had all these kind of delay tactics. They wouldn't even meet with us directly. We had to go through third countries. This is very simple. Let's meet directly. Let's work on agreements that are good for Iran, good for the Iranian people in particular, good for the safety and security of the world and the United States. That's always been our preference. That continues to be our preference. But they're the ones that were playing games with us. And these are the consequences. We had to achieve those objectives. We had 3 objectives yesterday: Bordeaux, Natanz, and Esfahan. We conducted a brilliant military operation under the command of President Trump, and obviously great credit to Secretary Hegseth and General Kurilla and General Kane and all the airmen and phenomenal people in the U.S. military. No other military in the world could have done this.
No,
We've
it's
achieved those
astounding.
objectives. What happens next is up to the regime. Okay, the regime wants peace. We're ready for peace. They want to do something else. They're incredibly vulnerable. They can't even protect their own airspace.
Well, clearly they could not. But what is the U.S. assessment of how much nuclear material at those sites was moved prior to the attack? There's been talk for days about bombing before now.
Well, look, we don't. No one will know for sure for days, but I doubt they moved it because you really can't move anything right now, and they can't move anything right now inside of Iran. I mean, the minute a truck starts driving somewhere, the Israelis have seen it and they've targeted it and taken it out. So our assessment is we have to assume that that's a lot of 60% enriched uranium buried deep under the ground there in Esfahan. And that really is the key. What they should do with that is they should bring it out of the ground and turn it over. Multiple countries around the world will take it and downblend it. That's what they should do with that. And what they should do is say, we're not going to have any enrichment capability in our country. Instead, what we're going to have is a civil nuclear program like dozens of countries around the world have, where we build reactors that create electricity and we import enriched material. And we've made very general, I'm not going to get all the details of the offers, but there are other avenues here that would be acceptable to them. If that's what they wanted, if what they want is a civil, peaceful nuclear program, the route has always been there. The problem is that everything they're demanding has nothing to do with a peaceful program. They are all the things you would want if you want to retain the option of one day weaponizing the program, which has been their clear intent. To me, that's indisputable. I followed this issue for 15 years, including the intelligence on it for 15 years. Okay, I have followed it. And the intelligence, these are assessments, and sometimes they've been wrong. I've seen them revised multiple times. These guys want a nuclear weapon one day.
Okay,
They
to
do.
that point.
And it isn't going to happen. Not while Donald Trump is president.
Understood. You said this is not about regime change, but you were describing a regime that you have said for decades, I mean, for upwards of 40 years, has chanted death to America, has done all the things you just described. Isn't a diplomatic deal with them a lifeline? aren't you offering to negotiate with the same people you're saying did all these things? So therefore, are you actually looking for regime change?
Well, that misses the point. I don't like that they chant those things, but one thing is that they chant those things. Another thing is that they chant those things and they have terror proxies are all over the world, and they have long-range missiles that can reach the United States one day, and they have the potential to be one step away from a nuclear weapon. Yeah, well, one day could be tomorrow, could be a week from now, could be a month from now. You know, all it takes is the flip of a switch. By the way, they're not going to broadcast that to the world. By the time we figure out that they're doing it, you have all the pieces in place. Okay, it's like you have loaded a gun here and the ammunition. It only takes 1 second. We have other targets that we could hit, but we achieved our objective. The primary targets we were interested in are the ones that were struck tonight in devastating fashion. The ones that were struck, I guess, yeah, tonight over there, their time, in devastating fashion, and we've achieved that objective. There are no planned military operations right now against Iran unless they mess around and they attack American or American interests. Then they're going to have a problem. And I'm not going to broadcast what those problems are. But suffice it to say, know this. The United States flew halfway around the world, right into the heart of Iran, over their most sensitive locations. These things got rocked. And then we left. And we were out of their airspace. We were over the ocean before they figured out what had happened. And there are plenty of other targets. We don't want to do that. That's not our preference. We want peace deals with them, and that's up to them to decide.
You said defend American interests. Would the United States military take action to keep, for example, the transit point, the Strait of Hormuz, open? If there are attacks on oil installations, would the United States consider that a direct act by the state, even if it was carried out by a militia?
Well, I'm not going to take options away from the president. That's not something we're talking about right now in terms of being immediate. But if they do that, the first people that should be angry about it are the Chinese government, because they take a lot of their oil comes through there. So they should be the first ones that are saying if they mine the Straits of Hormuz, the Chinese are going to pay a huge price. And every other country in the world is going to pay a huge price. We will too. It'll have some impact on us. It'll have a lot more impact on the rest of the world. A lot more impact on the rest of the world. It would be a suicidal move on their part, because I think the whole world would come against them if they did that.
Will the Chinese and Russians stop trading with Iran?
You have to ask the Chinese and the Russians. Probably not. I mean, they're getting, the Russians are getting a bunch of these, these drones that they're using are coming from Iran.
Exactly.
They're coming from Iran. So I saw the foreign minister, instead of meeting with Steve Witkoff, is headed to Moscow to meet with Putin, which was a pre-scheduled meeting, which is fine. They can go meet. And, the Russians, at the end of the day, I mean, they buy drones from them. But look, this is very simple. We want to have an agreement with them, a diplomatic agreement in which they have a civil nuclear program that are not enriching and don't have weapons-grade material or weapons-grade capabilities laying around. That's that simple. That's our interest here. Who they trade with, who they deal with, those are other topics. Our objective here is very straightforward. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon. They're not even going to get close to a nuclear weapon. They're not even going to be in the neighborhood of a nuclear weapon, because these people are dangerous. This is a radical Shia clerics who run that country, and they are the source of all instability in the region, all of it. Without Iran and this regime, there is no Hamas, there is no Hezbollah. Well, because we don't want them to have a nuclear weapon.
Okay,
but that's the core objective. But I'm going through the things they've done, because that's why they can't have a nuclear weapon. Okay, they sponsor Shia. They sponsor the Shia militias, Hamas, Hezbollah, all these other terrorist groups. These people are never going to get anywhere close to a nuclear weapon.
For the Americans at home who are going, are we at war? I'm trying to suss out some of the facts here. So why would Iran agree to any peace deal if the United States has already pulled out of one that they had, as President Trump did in 2018, and now launched two surprise?
The peace deal that they had was giving them money to hide their nuclear weapon capability. Brought to you by Barack Obama and John Kerry, who cares about so much the planet, but he'll let Iran go nuclear. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. C60 is going to soak up free radicals. That's really important for your cells. By soaking up those free radicals, you're reducing stress in the cell. You're improving the health of your mitochondria. You're going to have more energy. The tissues are going to perform better. Your immune system is going to perform better. Your endocrine system is going to perform better. Your neurons will perform better. Your organ systems will perform better. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, or avocado oil. Now, C60 has to be in an oil, because it's lipid soluble, so you can absorb it properly. Take a teaspoon a day every day. Very important. This will also soak up free radicals in your bloodstream. That's really important because if you soak up the free radicals in your bloodstream, you don't have as much oxidized LDL. And reduced oxidized LDL means reduced plaque formation. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take a teaspoon of this a day. Teaspoon a day, every day. I've been taking this since 2016. You don't want to look like an Alex Jones, all right? You want to look like a Dr. Paul Cottrell. Take a teaspoon a day, very important. Soak up those free radicals and slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. You can get the C60 in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. Get a higher ounce configuration. Why? Because it is cheaper for you. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. Let's go back to Face the Nation.
Attacks, both Israel and the United States have done so. There is such a massive trust deficit there. How could you possibly
but the trust deficit started with Iran.
I know.
Well, the trust deficit, the ones that shouldn't be trusted are the Iranians because they're the ones that sponsor terrorism. Did they forewarn us before they blew up the embassy in Lebanon and killed over 200 American servicemen? Did they forewarn us before they built IEDs and blew the legs and arms off of American servicemen in Iraq? I mean, these are the people that are doing this forever. They're the ones that no one should trust. They're the ones that have lied about their nuclear program.
But
they're
that
the ones that have hidden things from the international organisms.
But that sounds like we're headed towards regime change or the desire to get these people out of power. Are you?
No, a serious foreign policy is one that's focused on identifying what our national interest is. You don't have to like the regime. There are a lot of regimes around the world that we don't like, okay? But in this particular case, what we are focused on is not the changing of the regime. Okay, that's up to the Iranian people if they want to do that, but that's not what we're focused on. Our national interest is about one thing, and that is Iran not getting anywhere near the capability to weaponize and have nuclear weapons. They're not going to get anywhere near that capability. The president has made that clear from day one. Our preference for solving that problem, that very specific problem, is through diplomacy. We've said that. We've given it every opportunity. They played games. They tried delay tactics. They're trying delay tactics now on the Europeans because of the snapback provisions.
When did
and you
the
talk about the
president make
JCPOA,
this?
that was a crazy deal.
When did the president make this decision? Because he said he was giving 2 more weeks of diplomacy on Friday, and on Friday his jets took off.
Well, the president retains the opportunity to pull out of this at any moment, including 10 minutes before. But the president ordered options. The decision, in my view, was made when he wrote a letter to the supreme leader, and he said, over the next 60 days, we want to do a deal with you and solve this problem of nuclear weaponization.
Yeah.
We want to do it peacefully.
Okay.
If after 60 days we don't see progress or it isn't solved, we have other alternatives.
Right.
He made that very clear. I think what some people
Mr.
are struggling
Secretary.
with here is that we today have a president who does what he says he's going to do, and that's what happened here. And hopefully
Mr.
the Iranian
Secretary.
regime got that message.
We're going to hit a commercial break, so I have to wrap you there. Thank you very much for your time.
Be popular for the younger folks.
You know, it's really interesting question.
All right, let's see what's going on with Live Now
A vote for Zoran Mamdani is a vote to defund the police. With Mamdani, fewer cops, more crime, more chaos. It's no joke. It's a threat. Only you can stop him. Vote. Paid for by Fix the City.
Introducing Wegovy through Hims. Ready to lose up to 20% of your body.
And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike,
So they're just replaying,
this was U.S. operated. U.S.
Let's see, live. Let's go to GB News here.
Throughout the day. But if you're to the east of higher ground, so parts of County Antrim, County Down, possibly
France 24.
Jackson in Washington as well. Yeah, first of all, we're hearing from the leaders of the UK, France and Germany, E3 as they're known, urging Iran today to not take, quote, any actions that will destabilize the whole region. Talk us through the kind of rhetoric that we're now hearing, not just from the E3, but in Europe, and about how perhaps dangerous this moment is seen to be.
Well, there is a very strong consensus among the 27. We've heard the most heard voices amongst the Europeans, that is Germany and France, obviously, since the negotiations in Geneva on Friday last with the British Foreign Affairs Minister and also the Kaja Kallas, the Chief of European Diplomacy. They do have one common language, which is that there must be no escalation, that the moment is dangerous. The President of the European Council, that is Antonio Costa, is very afraid of the situation. That's his own words today. We've heard also from Kaja Kallas, obviously the chief of the European diplomacy, who says that we need, that is all of them, the Iranians, the Europeans, we need to go back to the negotiating table, exactly what Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the Commission, had said as well. So that's the option that the EU 27 wants now to, they want to exist, obviously. They seem to be the only reliable or acceptable diplomatic partner that Iran could have, and they want to go back to Geneva in a way.
Pierre, good to talk to you. Let's go to Said in Tehran, because Said, Ketevan spoke a moment ago. There's a
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley is a dense protein. It's in a powdered form. And you take it every day. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with milk. Take it every day, and it's going to help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and it will soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. Take this every day. It's really important. By bringing down inflammation and detoxifying your body, you're helping your immune system. You're also helping your vascular system. And like I said, it's really important to pay attention that in the next 5 years, people that you know will start to have cognitive decline. You're going to start seeing people having some sort of Parkinsonian tremor. You're going to start seeing people having gait issues. You're going to start seeing people that are going to have memory lapses. They're going to be thinking slower. And these are people that are in their 40s or 50s. It's going to happen within 5 years. So you better start paying attention. And to reduce some of this is to take some of the neuroprotectors that I've been saying, apply a holistic approach to your health, get proper exercise and proper diet, proper sleep are super important, and bring down inflammation, because chronic inflammation at the cerebral level will degrade your neurons. So you want to bring down that inflammation. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the supplements that I've been telling you and how to stack, slow down that aging process, and mitigate some of the problems that are coming to the fore. Thank you for listening. I will be doing a show with John Hogue tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So that's New York time. We'll have X spaces open for you to ask questions. I'm sure we're going to be covering a lot about what's going on with Iran. We are in historic moments of human history. I greatly appreciate you watching the show. Please help support the work by going to my store and getting the great products that I offer. All these videos are for free that I do. I believe that news, in my opinion, about it should be for free. I don't put stuff behind a paywall, all right? But I offer a lot of good advice on how to manage how to manage through tumultuous times in the financial markets and how to improve your health. So please listen and help support the work that I do. Thank you for listening. I greatly appreciate it. Have a nice day, and please watch the live show tonight at 10 p.m. with John Hogue and myself. Have a good day.